Chapter 2285. Could he use the power of faith and the power of the soul to attack? However, this monster did not seem to have a soul. He did not know if the power of the soul would work. When the Cheongsam man returned, his face was dark. Looking at him, Ning Shu knew that they had no way of leaving this place. Ning Shu felt that the entire organization was like a cold machine, operating according to established procedures without any human feelings. They knew that the law incarnations were not of much use here, but they did not intend to let them go. Since the power of the law was useless, they could only use the power of faith to attack. After a battle, all the law incarnations would become poor. However, no one knew how long the power of faith could last. Perhaps when their power of faith was exhausted, the people on the other side would let them go. Sigh. The Cheongsam man fanned himself with his fan, looking very irritated. We can't leave. Then what should we do? Should we hug each other and cry? Ning Shu said, spreading his hands. Ning Shu squatted down like a hooligan. The Cheongsam man lifted his Cheongsam and squatted beside Ning Shu, saying, "You know the people on the other side. Why don't you apply too? You're thinking too much. Why should I apply? I'm afraid I won't even have the chance to open my mouth." No way. Ning Shu hurriedly waved his hand. Finally, he looked at the Cheongsam man with tears in his eyes. He looked so pitiful. Zhu Li, can you apply for a weapon? A law incarnation that was so thin that he was all skin and bones said to the Cheongsam man. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows. So the Cheongsam man was called Zhu Li. It's not that I don't want to apply, it's that I can't. If I could, I would have applied without hesitation. The Cheongsam man sighed and wiped his face. You know that I'm the law of strength. I can't do much damage to these monsters, the skinny man said. Ning Shu was speechless. Looking at this guy who looked like an opium addict, he was actually the law of strength incarnation. Just by looking at his appearance, who would know that he was the law of strength? He did not look strong at all, and he did not have any muscles. It was a complete contrast. Why don't you apply for a weapon? In the future, we won't be able to use the power of laws. We can only rely on weapons, the Cheongsam man said to Ning Shu. In order to obtain a weapon that consumed less energy, Ning Shu had to run around twice before finally obtaining a weapon. Since he wanted to apply for a weapon, he would definitely need a lot of it. With so many law incarnations, Ning Shu could already imagine Fragrant Wind's furious expression. The law of strength looked at Ning Shu with a pair of listless eyes. Can you really apply? Of course not. Ning Shu hurriedly shook his head. If she vowed that she would be able to get a weapon, how would she get one if she didn't get one? Ning Shu wouldn't make any promises if he wasn't confident. If he succeeded, it would be an unexpected surprise. Since I can't use the power of laws, I'll use other powers. Ning Shu was thinking about what kind of power he would use. Spiritual power. Using spiritual power as a weapon to attack the opponent, he didn't know if it would work. Soul power could also be used as a means of attack, but he didn't know if it would work. She couldn't use peerless martial arts because she was now a soul and didn't have a physical body to cultivate. My law of strength is only a physical attack against monsters. Even if I used my strength to kill the monster, its corpse would be dismembered by other monsters and insects, the law of strength said, shaking her head. Ning Shu pulled his hair in distress. All the law incarnations were like people on a broken boat. Once someone couldn't hold on, they would be like a flood that couldn't be stopped. Although there were still many golden bones holding rusty iron swords in front of him, Ning Shu didn't feel safe at all. Who knew how long these bones could last? Then I'll give it a try. If I can't apply, there's nothing I can do. Everyone should think of a way to use other powers. Ning Shu stood up and said. Although he knew that he might be sprayed in the face, it was nothing compared to his life. Ning Shu walked outside the tent and pricked his ears to listen for any movement inside. After confirming that there was someone inside, Ning Shu said to the sole soldier guarding outside the tent, "Can you inform the general?" The general said that he doesn't want to see anyone now, the soldier said firmly as he puffed out his chest and exuded a murderous aura. "Then when can we meet?" Ning Shu asked. "I don't know." Ning Shu, he had no choice. He had a favor to ask. Ning Shu stood outside the tent and waited until the other party was done. He didn't know what was being discussed inside. There seemed to be quite a number of people and it was a little noisy. Ning Shu wanted to get closer, but the soldier guarding the tent's entrance stared straight at Ning Shu. Ning Shu silently took 2 steps back and tried to use his mental strength to form a 40-meter-long saber. With a whoosh, he pulled out his 40-meter-long saber. Ning Shu kept looking at the tent's curtain. He didn't know when he would come out. He waited until he was haggard. Who knew when he would be attacked? The nomological embodiment was still waiting for him. After waiting for a long time, the curtain was finally lifted. People came out one after another. Ning Shu craned his neck. It was hard to imagine that so many people could come out of this bun-like tent. "Why are you here?" Mo Ming was talking to the person beside her, who was also wearing a military uniform. When she saw Ning Shu, she craned her neck and said something to the person beside her. Ning Shu came over and asked her. "I'm looking for the big boss," Ning Shu said. "The general won't see you. He's busy with more important things." Mo Ming looked at Ning Shu and said, "You can tell me what you need. I can help you as much as I can." Ning Shu looked at the medal on Mo Ming's chest. It was a medal with 1 star and 1 bar. How much power could it have? Ning Shu touched his chin, tiptoed, and tilted his head to look at the medal. "Ahem, I need some weapons," Ning Shu said. Mo Ming pondered for a moment and asked, "Why do you suddenly need weapons?" "Because the nomological power might be useless, so I have to prepare in advance," Ning Shu said. Logically speaking, a piece of trash like her should be expelled from the battlefield. If she was really expelled, Ning Shu would be very grateful. Mo Ming said, "How many do you need?" "How many do you need?" Ning Shu asked in surprise, "How much can you get with your authority?" "I can't get much. At most, 300 sticks, Mo Ming said. "That's a lot, a lot." To Ning Shu, more than 100 sticks was a lot. After all, if she wanted a gun, she would be criticized badly. /BK Chapter 2292. Since he couldn't protect it anymore, he had to give these monsters that made him sacrifice something precious a big gift. The peerless martial art was still absorbing the monsters. Ning Shu entered the world in a flash. These monsters came to an unfamiliar place. At first, they were a little confused. But when they entered a plane of existence, they instantly became excited and started to eat the world. The world was densely packed with monsters. Ning Shu kicked them one by one. The vines wrapped around the monsters and threw them one by one into the law of nothingness. These monsters didn't even have a chance to struggle before they were swallowed by the law of nothingness. Ning Shu threw these monsters into the law of nothingness like dumplings. The slightly stronger monsters were annihilated with a cry. It seemed that the law of nothingness had strengthened again. Ning Shu felt like he was feeding the wolves. Although he could temporarily kill these monsters, it also strengthened the law of nothingness lake. Ning Shu grinned. In this world, he seemed to be a god. These monsters couldn't attack him, and he could easily throw these monsters into the law of nothingness. Drinking poison to quench thirst. When the law of nothingness swallowed this world, he had to divert the disaster. The monsters were constantly being sucked into the world. The law of nothingness continued to devour these monsters and grew stronger. The law of nothingness spread to Ning Shu's feet and moved forward and backward like a tide. Ning Shu took 2 steps back. If he touched the law of nothingness, he would be devoured. Countless monsters struggled in the law of nothingness and were annihilated in the end. If these monsters had corpses, they should have a lot of military merits. But even the corpses were devoured and assimilated. Ning Shu came out of the world. Seeing that the peerless martial art was even more dilapidated, his face was as cold as iron. He silently watched more and more monsters being sucked into the world and becoming nourishment for the law of nothingness. Because of the peerless martial art, the pressure on this side was much lower. Otherwise, without Bonehead's help, this side would have broken through very quickly. According to normal calculations, if so many monsters entered a world, the world would definitely explode. Also, the world should have been devoured. But the monsters that entered this world never returned. Squeak squeak, squeak squeak squeak. The sound of rats grinding their teeth could be heard. More and more monsters were running towards them. Although these monsters did not return, they still needed to be checked. Ning Shu sneered. Seeing more and more monsters coming towards him, the peerless martial art unleashed an even stronger suction force, sucking in even more monsters. Even so, there were still a lot of monsters coming over. The monster's magma-like saliva splashed onto the ultimate martial art, making it even dimmer. Ning Shu raised his saber and slashed at the spitting monster, chopping it into pieces. Ning Shu floated in the air in a red dress. Her skin was very pale, and wearing a red dress made her skin seem transparent. The Cheongsam man. Are you alright? Ning Shu turned around. What can happen to me? The man in the Cheongsam rubbed his nose. Right now, it was as if this guy had been possessed by the god of slaughter. He was simply crazy. He had destroyed the world that he had built. It was just giving nourishment to the monsters. After devouring the world, the monsters would become even stronger. This was like feeding the monsters when they were hungry. What was the difference between this and feeding the monsters? Ning Shu entered the ultimate martial art. Countless monsters struggled and wailed as they were swallowed. The lake of the law of nothingness grew bigger again. It was even bigger than before. It was getting bigger and bigger. Soon, the ultimate martial art would appear. In the end, even the ultimate martial art would be swallowed. If the law of nothingness was like a baby before, its swallowing ability was not that strong. Now, the law of nothingness had become a young man with power. Moreover, it would become more and more powerful. The bigger the lake, the more damage it would cause to the world. Yet, she was still feeding these monsters. Ning Shu did not know what to feel. Fuck. His heart was numb. Previously, there was a fish tank that could withstand the law of nothingness. Now, there was probably nothing that could withstand this thing. It spread out, and billions of planes were swallowed. Actually, this was quite good. He could directly destroy the plane and watch these monsters eat. Ning Shu supported his chin as he watched batch after batch of monsters being swallowed. The world let out a sound that could not bear the burden. It was like glass that was about to explode into pieces. He saw with his own eyes that the things he cherished were slowly being destroyed and would no longer exist. Ning Shu felt that no matter how many monsters there were, it would not be enough to be buried with him. He needed more monsters. She did not care about the benefits behind this war. What she cherished was gone. She could not protect it. She was dragging these things along with the things she cherished. A drop of emerald green water appeared on Ning Shu's fingertip. The drop of water grew bigger and bigger. It flew into the clouds. The emerald green raindrops fell everywhere in the world. They fell into the law of nothingness. There was no green at all. The vines wrapped around the monsters and sucked them dry. More and more emerald green water droplets rose into the air. It was like a rainstorm. The green rain flowed everywhere in the world. She hoped that this reign that was filled with vitality could allow the peerless martial arts to last a little longer. There would be more monsters to strengthen the law of nothingness. When the world could not hold on anymore, she would give the monsters on the other side of the black hole a surprise. Ning Shu came out of the world and looked at the dim and broken peerless martial arts. The words on it were completely gone. The pages were filled with marks. Your world can't hold on anymore. The Cheongsam man, Ning Shu, said. I know I can't hold on anymore. Ning Shu nodded. His eyes stared straight at the black hole. There were many black holes. Ning Shu casually pointed at the black hole. She should be throwing the peerless martial arts into one of them. If she chose that one, Ning Shu stretched out her white finger and pointed at one of the black holes. The Cheongsam man felt that this woman was crazy. She did things like a crazy person. Should she take the peerless martial arts and directly rush to the black hole over there and choose the biggest target? That would not do. What if he died? He had sacrificed such a precious thing in order to live. There was no reason to sacrifice the peerless martial arts and send himself to death. Then choose the closest black hole. Ning Shu pointed at a black hole. It's you. Ka ka. The surface of the peerless martial arts was covered with more cracks. The sound seemed to crack Ning Shu's heart. It was as if his heart had cracked open. Stop fooling around. Your world is about to explode. The Cheongsam man frowned and said, Are you crazy? What triggered you? Standing beside her, he felt a wave of low pressure. Chapter 2293. This girl was shrouded in intense sadness. Standing beside her, one would be infected. The man in the Cheongsam did not know what happened when she ran away. She disappeared with the huge monster. She came back, but the monster did not. The monster must be dead. It must have used some trump card. That was why she looked like she had nothing left to live for. The man in the Cheongsam sighed and said to Ning Shu, You have to give up something to gain something. Don't be like this. I once gave up something that was extremely important to me. Ning Shu stretched out her hand. The peerless martial art closed and flew into Ning Shu's hand. Touching the cracked peerless martial art, Ning Shu did not dare to blink. She closed her eyes and threw the peerless martial art into the black hole. This is a big gift for you. Accept it. Don't you like to eat worlds? As long as you bite the world, the law of nothingness will gush out. Ning Shu watched as the peerless martial art penetrated the black hole and disappeared before her eyes. She did not know what kind of world was on the other side of the black hole. She did not know if the peerless martial art had collapsed, if it had been bitten open by the monster, if the law of nothingness had already gushed out. The world was so broken that a little bit of power could shatter it. Ning Shu stared blankly at the black hole. A corner of her heart was missing. She was filled with despair and unbearable sadness. It was because she was not strong enough. It was because she did not work hard enough. Therefore, she had to sacrifice the things that had always accompanied her, the things that she had always believed in and relied on. She could not even protect the things that she cherished. What was the point of her suffering and struggle all this time? The world should be broken now. The law of nothingness should have devoured many monsters. The law of nothingness would grow bigger and bigger, devouring more and more monsters. Ning Shu laughed out loud. She laughed until tears streamed down her face. She was both happy and desperate. What else would she lose? What else would this war take away from her? She had nothing left to sacrifice. Without the peerless martial art, the pressure on the man in the Cheongsam multiplied. Not only did he have to kill the enemy, but he also had to take care of Ning Shu, who was like a lunatic. He was so tired that he suddenly died. He would go crazy if he was stimulated any further. Ning Shu held the gun and fired without any hesitation. Even the world was gone. This bit of faith power only made people feel more numb. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The piercing sound spread to every corner of the battlefield. The monsters that heard the sound began to retreat. In a short while, the monsters had all retreated. Ning Shu revealed an ugly smile. It would be even better if they returned. Then, he would be able to catch them all in one fell swoop. The more monsters he devoured, the stronger the law of nothingness, and the stronger the law of nothingness, the more monsters he could devour. The black hole rippled with layer after layer of ripples. A book flew out and landed in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu stretched out his hand and hugged the book. He squatted down and cried loudly, his heart breaking. She hugged the peerless martial art book tightly as tears dripped onto the cracked pages of the book. Ning Shu hugged the peerless martial art book and stumbled over to the huge abyssal prefect, wailing loudly, "Help me, help me." Perhaps the monsters had sensed something in the world, or perhaps they knew that it was a trap, so they used the same method to destroy the forces here. Now that it was back in front of her, she could not give up. The abyssal prefect's figure shrank, becoming a man in a tuxedo. "Why are you crying?" The abyssal prefect took out a stack of checkered handkerchiefs. Ning Shu wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "Please help me. I can agree to any condition." The abyssal prefect looked calmly at the book in Ning Shu's arms. He stretched out his slender and pale hand and took the book, flipping it open casually. "Oh, the law of nothingness. It's hopeless. The world will be devoured." The abyssal prefect said coldly. "Impossible." Ning Shu shouted a little shrilly. Everything had a counter. She did not believe that there was nothing that could counter this thing. It was just that she did not know what it was. Back then, the fish tank had also restrained it. However, as it grew, the fish tank could no longer do anything to it. Ning Shu did not want to cry, but his tears could not be controlled at all. Ning Shu wiped his face carelessly. He wanted to show a reserved smile, but he was crying and laughing at the same time. There must be a way. The abyssal prefect looked indifferently at the crying Ning Shu. He thought for a moment and said, "Go and ask senior uncle." "Can he help?" Ning Shu asked. The abyssal prefect said, "When the world is broken and the law of nothingness flows out, he can put it away, so that the law of nothingness does not devour things everywhere." Ning Shu opened his mouth slightly and looked dazed. The abyssal prefect said, "Give this world to him and keep it in your hands. When the law of nothingness devours the world, you will be the next one to be devoured." Ning Shu squatted down and covered his face with his hands. Tears flowed out between his fingers. He said heartbreakingly, "I want my world back." He gave it up once and returned it to her. He could not give it up a second time. There will be other world carriers. Leave this world to others. Your world can't hold on anymore. That's all I can say. If you don't want to listen, forget it. The abyssal prefect glanced behind Ning Shu. Those sacrificed themselves. The abyssal prefect was talking about bones. Ning Shu covered his face and said in a muffled voice, "I'm sorry. It's normal to have sacrifices in war." A black carved door appeared in front of the abyssal prefect. The abyssal prefect walked in and disappeared in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu squatted on the ground and hugged the peerless martial art tightly, crying loudly. Even if the peerless martial art returned to her hands, it would only have the fate of extinction. Give it to senior uncle. However, he could only wait for the world to be destroyed and then deal with the law of nothingness. When the world was destroyed and the law of nothingness spread out, no one here would be enough to devour. That was why those monsters were able to return this thing untouched. The abyssal prefect had no choice but to give the world to senior uncle. Ning Shu stood up and walked back with the peerless martial art. She was at a loss and did not know what to do. Therefore, she had to hand over the peerless martial art for the second time. At this moment, Ning Shu could not cry even if she wanted to. Her tears seemed to have dried up. If there was nothing to devour, the law of nothingness would devour the world. But if it devoured other things, it would grow stronger and stronger. Once there was nothing left to devour, it would instantly devour the world. Ning Shu sniffed. She had to compromise and give up because she could not do anything about the law of nothingness. Because she was not strong enough, there had to be sacrifices. Ning Shu hugged the peerless martial art and squatted at the side. The Cheongsam man sighed and squatted beside Ning Shu. What are you thinking? I want the best of both worlds, but it's impossible. Ning Shu grinned and revealed an extremely ugly smile, making her face look very blurry. She wanted a world, a perfect world. But this world was on the verge of collapse and could not be saved. Chapter 2294. Even if the law of nothingness left this world had almost lost the capital to become a living world. It was so dilapidated that even if it was repaired, it would not be the intact world from before. It was a kind of spiritual separation, not only because it was not worth it to search for the origin of the world. Ning Shu held the peerless martial art, but it could only slow down the progress of the law of nothingness devouring the world. There was nothing that could strengthen the world. When she found the boundary stone, it could strengthen the world, but it was swallowed by the world of samsara, which was still a black hole. Ning Shu rubbed her face with her hands. When the world really couldn't support it, she would hand it over to the grand-uncle. Handing it over to the grand-uncle meant that the world would completely disappear. She would not throw it into the black hole on the opposite side again. The other party must have seen through it. Ning Shu decided that she would not let go of the peerless martial art unless it was a last resort. She didn't know if she would encounter the carrier of the world again. Collecting the peerless martial art from the beginning made Ning Shu feel very powerless and exhausted. Especially after the war and the peace talks, the circulation of the world's origin in the market was even less. Ning Shu wanted to laugh. What could she say? Everything was her own choice. She had to bear the consequences. Ning Shu wiped her face and told 2333 that she wanted to return to the system space. She didn't want to stay on the battlefield now. 2333 didn't say anything and sent Ning Shu back to the system space. Ning Shu put the peerless martial art on the coffee table and sat on the sofa to look at it. It was full of spiderweb-like cracks. It couldn't hold on for long. Ning Shu opened the system exchange store to see if there were any items that could stabilize the world. Not only the world, but also an indescribable feeling. It was like the person closest to you was sick. As long as you were alive, you could fix it and see the doctor. You could hold on for as long as you could. Ning Shu's fingers flipped through the system exchange store page by page, but she didn't find what she wanted. Ning Shu clenched his hands into fists. All of his hands were filled with flashy but impractical trash. He couldn't find any of them even if he wanted to. These kinds of things could only be deceived to become a mission enforcer. He was afraid that the truly precious items couldn't be bought with the power of faith and virtue. They had been kept by someone else. Trash. Ning Shu closed the system exchange store and curled up her body. She buried her head in her arms and wailed loudly. As she cried, she hammered her chest. She felt like it was going to split open. It hurt so much. All of the despair and pain was because she wasn't strong enough. If she could kill that monster, she wouldn't have to sacrifice this world that was about to be completed. She had chosen such a method and was greedy to protect this world. She had already made up her mind to sacrifice something, but now she was crying and making a fuss to protect it. 2333, she cried like a pig. Ning Shu wiped his face carelessly and entered the world. He saw a lake that was even bigger than before. The amber water was clear and there was nothing in it. There were no aquatic plants or fish. Fuck, your ancestors are 18 generations old. Ning Shu shouted at the lake. His voice traveled far and wide. Layers of ripples appeared on the calm surface of the water. Ning Shu sat down, grabbed a stone, and threw it into the lake. A layer of ripples appeared. Almost instantly, the stone disappeared. If the law of nothingness was still in the fish tank, he could try to adjust it. But now, the law of nothingness couldn't even touch it, let alone jump. In a very, very short time, it would be swallowed and assimilated. There were so many monsters, and there were even some powerful monsters. Weren't they also devoured? In her world, if the peerless martial arts didn't return to her, she wouldn't be so sad. Even if it was eaten by monsters, those monsters would also be swallowed by the law of nothingness. Ning Shu really wanted to save this world. The law of nothingness was slowly expanding, eating away at this world. The battle has started. You should go back, 2333 said to Ning Shu. So fast. The law of time system notified me. You're considered a deserter, 2333 said. Ning Shu wiped his tears with his sleeve and returned to the system space. Ning Shu asked 2333, do you have any ideas? If you can help me this time, I'll give you another 10% of the soul power. You can have 20%, and I'll have 20%, 2333 was silent. Ning Shu laughed. 2333's silence meant that he was tempted by the 10% of the soul power. It was more likely that he had a way. You can look for Tai Shu, 2333 said. His voice sounded a little constipated, as if it came from his throat. Why do all of you want me to look for him? Even if I find him, it doesn't mean that he will help. Instead, he will take this world away. After all, it's about to collapse. The law of nothingness inside is about to gush out and swallow everything in its path, including the plane. Ning Shu understood that she was holding a bomb in her hand, and it was an unpredictable bomb. It might explode at any time. 2333 said, the law of nothingness is like water. You have to fix the pool so that it won't leak. Tai Shu has such a thing in his hand. Ning Shu understood. He had something like a fish tank in his hand. It could hold the law of nothingness like a fish tank so that it wouldn't swallow the world. This kind of thing was probably very rare and precious. Actually, you can give this world to him and let him deal with the law of nothingness inside. You won't be able to get it from him. Maybe he will ask you to hand over the world. If you don't hand it over, he will just kill you and then deal with the world. He won't let you hold such a dangerous thing around. It's not worth it to go through so much trouble for an already broken world. Ning Shu slowly squatted down and crossed her arms. She felt a chill shuttling through every corner of her body. She said to 2333, is he the only one who has it? Yes, only he has it. He's doing crazy things, 2333 said, almost gnashing his teeth. Ning Shu felt that if she couldn't get it, she wouldn't be able to pay such a price. She might even have to hand over the world. Logically speaking, she should get rid of the world as soon as possible. However, when the peerless martial art flew back into her hands, she couldn't hold back her tears. She couldn't throw it out again. If you can help me get this thing, I'll give you 10% of my soul power. The remaining 10% would be used to support the reincarnation world. She couldn't use it herself. If she used it, it wouldn't be enough. Listening to 2333's tone, he definitely knew Tai Shu and probably had some grudges. However, it was still more likely than her going to ask for it. 2333 laughed a few times and then went silent. Obviously, he refused. Ning Shu frowned. That meant that she couldn't get it. If he wasn't tempted by 10% of her soul power, was he still 2333? I advise you to give up this world because it's not worth it. It's too dangerous. Don't be troubled by such a little emotion. I've given you advice. You don't have to listen to it, 2333 said. Chapter 2295. Indeed, she should give it up. Things had gone out of control. It had devoured the world and would soon devour her and more things. Well, 20% of the strength of soul. Ning Shu was speechless. 10% of the strength of soul was taken away just by providing a piece of information. Ning Shu transferred some strength of soul into the world of samsara and filled it with some spiritual liquid. Then she went to the Nine Palace Mountain and found second young master. He should have exchanged a lot of soul stones. Pai Lupi was very excited to see Ning Shu. But when he saw Ning Shu's gloomy face, his smile faded a little. He asked Li Si to take out the soul stones he had exchanged during this period. Ning Shu accepted the soul stones and gave him some spirit liquid to continue exchanging. She didn't have time to waste on these spirit liquids and soul stones that were not of good quality. Wait. Pai Lupi saw that Ning Shu didn't say much and her momentum was frightening. Pai Lupi braced himself to stop Ning Shu. Ning Shu looked back at him. Pai Lupi swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said, "Can you give me some emerald green water like last time?" Next, second young master Li blabbered on and on about his business plan. In short, he needed the liquid that was full of vitality. Ning Shu looked calm and asked Pai Lupi to find something to fill the water. Pai Lupi found a big basin and held it in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu glanced at Pai Lupi. The emerald green liquid appeared on her fingers. It grew bigger and filled the basin. Pai Lupi cheered in his heart. He should have taken a big water tank. What about the share? Pai Lupi glanced at Ning Shu carefully. He felt that this girl was a little scary and gloomy. I'll buy the treasure of heaven and earth seedlings. It's my job to take care of them and deal with them later. Pai Lupi said. Ning Shu raised her eyelids. So. Pai Lupi almost choked to death. What's wrong with this guy? Then we'll each take half. Pai Lupi said. Ha ha ha. Ning Shu glanced at Pai Lupi. Why don't you take part in the fighting power? Without it, do you still have your life? Very few people could resist the overwhelming number of vines. Second young master Li looked at Ning Shu. Then let's make it 40-60. I'll be in charge of everything. You just need to collect the soul stones. My bottom line is 40-60. Ning Shu nodded. Then it's 46. Please keep it in mind. Pai Lupi nodded. As a business partner, he asked kindly, did something happen to you? Yes, but you can't help me. I'm leaving. Ning Shu turned and left. Pai Lupi's heart was beating fast. I'm the second young master of the Li family. Is there nothing I can solve here? But then he thought about the vines in the sky. That girl could make so much green liquid full of vitality. If she couldn't solve it, then he really couldn't solve it. They sent a message saying that someone is looking for you. They want you to go back. 2333 said. You're going to be a deserter. What if you get killed? Ning Shu said, I knew the battle hadn't started. The time between battles wouldn't be so short. Ning Shu returned to the battlefield with the peerless martial art. The man in the Cheongsam was fanning himself. When he saw Ning Shu, he said, why did you disappear so quickly? Why did you call me? Ning Shu asked. The man in the Cheongsam frowned. The military is looking for you. Why? Ning Shu nodded. He said to the man in the Cheongsam, you should hurry up and write a report to collect taxes. The higher-ups probably wouldn't object to this kind of consumption of their own resources. The man in the Cheongsam closed his fan. You're taking it. I'm taking it. It's almost used up anyway. Ning Shu said. Then I'm going to write a report. You should hurry up too. Someone is looking for you. Ning Shu put away the peerless martial art and headed back to his tent. He wondered if His Excellency had told others about the law of nothingness. But, from his interactions with His Excellency, he wasn't the sort of person who gossiped. Even if he did, it wouldn't have mattered. The peerless martial art had absorbed so many monsters on the battlefield, and those monsters didn't come back. It was normal for someone to notice it. Ning Shu opened the tent curtain. There were a few people sitting inside. Fragrant Wind Man, the silver-haired man, and the senior uncle. Ning Shu's gaze lingered on the senior uncle for a moment, thinking about the probability of getting the item. When he saw the senior uncle's cold face, he felt that the probability of getting the item was negative. And he asked about the situation, and Ning Shu told him the truth. Everyone in the room frowned. This kind of thing can't be kept. If you can't handle it, give it to someone else, and he said. And he said, if the world is devoured and caught off guard, everyone will be devoured, including the planes behind it. The senior uncle tapped the table with his finger. Put it on the table. He hadn't expected it to come so soon. If he insisted on keeping the item by his side, he might be harming others and himself. It wouldn't be tenable in any way. Ning Shu knew this in his heart, but he couldn't accept it. Ning Shu looked at the senior uncle and opened his mouth. Can you give me something that can resist the law of nothingness swallowing the world? The senior uncle raised his eyebrows. No. As expected, Ning Shu took out the peerless martial art and placed it on the table. After dealing with the law of nothingness, please return the world to me. The peerless martial art had dimmed, and there were more cracks on it. And he said, with a little power, this world will collapse. I'm willing. Even if it's broken, I like it. You can't be greedy for my broken world, right? Ning Shu said. No one is greedy for your broken world, but it will break if you don't pay attention. Do you understand? And he said. Why do you have such a dangerous thing? Someone forcefully gave it to me. Ning Shu looked at the senior uncle. What kind of price do I have to pay to get something from you that can resist the law of nothingness? Impossible, the senior uncle said coldly. Ning Shu took a deep breath and suppressed the panic and despair in his heart. Then I have a request. You can do whatever you want with the law of nothingness in the world, but my world can't break. Otherwise, I won't hand it over. You're crazy. What right do you have to negotiate with me? The senior uncle sneered. Whether you hand it over or not doesn't affect me. You don't understand. What right do you have to bring such a thing and threaten everyone's lives? Bringing a bomb on the plane, threatening other people's lives, and asking for a lot of things. Killing him now was already the biggest condition. You don't have a clear mind. I'm tired of this kind of brainless person. Ning Shu was speechless and didn't say anything. Deal with it as you wish. He turned and left the tent. She looked up at the vast universe and billions of planes. In order to protect these, she had sacrificed herself. She kept shouting in her heart. Why? Why? Chapter 2296. Ning Shu stood outside the tent. She felt as if a nuclear bomb had exploded in her heart. All kinds of emotions made her dizzy. She couldn't control her emotions anymore. She wouldn't cry anymore because crying was useless. If tears were useful, why bother to be strong? She would cry every day. Because she was too weak, she didn't even have a chance to talk. There was no way to negotiate. She couldn't even communicate on equal terms. Ning Shu could pay the price and obtain a treasure from the grand uncle that could contain the law of nothingness. But, she didn't want to talk about it. If she continued to cause trouble, she would be killed without hesitation. Compared to the billions of planes, she was really insignificant. She couldn't jump out of the rules. She would be suppressed by the rules. The law of the jungle existed no matter where she was. If she ran slowly and was born weak, she could only be eaten. Ning Shu's whole body was shaking. She wanted to leave the battlefield, but she also knew that she wanted to live and sacrificed her own things. She couldn't blame anyone but herself. She was struggling desperately in her heart. It was clearly her own actions, but she couldn't help but want to vent her anger. She was still measuring why her efforts were like bubbles with no return. She thought that there must be a return for her efforts. She couldn't get this return, and she didn't even get a word of thanks. She was resentful. Ning Shu's soul was affected by all kinds of emotions. Her soul was about to be torn apart. She couldn't help but cry out, "Ah!" No one forced her to make such a decision. She couldn't even find a resentful person to do it. She was just being unreasonable. Along the way, she didn't seem to have lost too much. She suddenly lost her peerless martial arts. When she poured a lot of effort into it, she was afraid that she would succeed in one step. This feeling of failure was too torturous. Ning Shu couldn't calm down. Her heart wasn't as strong as she thought. She couldn't face these things calmly. When she was recommended, she spent 500,000 merit points on the law of nothingness. Now, she had lost a world. 500,000 merit points. Ning Shu could only say that her life was actually very valuable. She had to live well. "You're still here." The abyssal prefect appeared in the tent, wiping his hands with a handkerchief. Even the nobles and gentlemen of the human world didn't recognize him. He had countless years of experience, and he was a gentleman deep in his bones, but so was his coldness. Being a gentleman was just another face of being an abyssal prefect. "Yes, I am still here. This place seems to be the heart of power. I will stand here for a while to feel the feeling of standing in the heart of power," Ning Shu said with a smile. The abyssal prefect folded the handkerchief neatly, revealing a sharp corner, and placed it in his chest pocket, revealing a corner. His movements were smooth and beautiful, and it was also the image of a gentleman. If one were to imagine a yiksha folding a handkerchief, one would be unable to bear the sight of it. Ning Shu was a little curious. Since when did abyssal prefect like to act like a gentleman? What's the big deal about authority? It's just something that comes with strength. Which of those standing here isn't powerful? Abyssal prefect replied calmly. Ning Shu nodded. "You're right. Wait here. I have something to do in there. Go in when I tell you to." The abyssal prefect lifted the curtain and entered the tent. Although she didn't know what the abyssal prefect wanted to do, Ning Shu still waited outside the tent. "Little Silver and he, go out for a while. I have something to discuss with Tai Shu." The silver-haired man took his book and followed he out of the tent. Ning Shu saw the two of them and pretended not to see them. The two of them also ignored her and walked past her. "Just throw this world inside." The abyssal prefect looked at the cracked book on the table. "What else? Just throw it away. This kind of world has no value in preserving it," Tai Shu said. "Let her play with this thing. It's just a handful of the law of nothingness. Even if you play with it, you won't be able to create a new law. It's the same as putting eggs in a basket. It's just a handful. It's easy to drown an ant. It's very dangerous to leave it in her hands." Tai Shu rejected. "What's the big deal? Give her some scraps to hold the law of nothingness and let her play with it," the abyssal prefect said. "The situation in the sea of laws is getting worse. If someone is willing to play with the law of nothingness, let them play with it. Pay more attention. If they really cross the line, just kill them." Tai Shu adjusted his glasses. "I still don't agree." "Fine. In any case, you have the final say in the matters of the plane. However, you have to speed up. The sea of laws shouldn't be able to last much longer." The abyssal prefect just said casually. As for whether Tai Shu agreed or not, the abyssal prefect didn't care at all. Tai Shu frowned. "Originally, if we devoured Jingqing, we should be able to speed up. However, we didn't expect that he would turn around and refine it. We had no choice but to pull him out. The abyssal prefect also frowned. There was a hint of melancholy between his brows. Do as you see fit. If something happens to the billions of planes, the billions of reincarnation worlds are almost finished. What else do you need? I'll get someone to collect it. The abyssal prefect said. Taishu shook his head. Jingqing is the best choice. But Jingqing's situation isn't suitable to throw him in. Otherwise, we'll suffer a double loss. He doesn't care about these planes at all. It's hard to guarantee that he won't turn around and deal with us after refining it successfully. The abyssal prefect said. Otherwise, we wouldn't have extracted his soul back then. That law of nothingness can't be given to her. Taishu shook his head. From all aspects. The abyssal prefect crossed his fingers and pondered for a moment. We can give it to her. What's your plan? Taishu looked at him. I don't have a plan. I just feel that there's a chance that her world will become a reincarnation world. There are too many mission enforcers worlds. The reincarnation world won't be able to handle it, the abyssal prefect said. As for the law of nothingness, just give her some scraps and she'll be able to suppress it. Give her some benefits, and she'll be so angry, like a crab baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. She'll feel that she's been wronged. It'll be a huge sacrifice. With such a childish temperament, it's even more unsuitable to leave dangerous things by her side. If she encounters something that can't be settled, she'll use it to do evil, Taishu said directly. Let's not talk about this anymore. His finger lightly tapped the peerless martial art on the table. The peerless martial art made a few cracking sounds, and more cracks appeared on its surface. A world like this will shatter with a single touch. Before the law of nothingness can devour it, it'll shatter on its own. And she wants me to return it to her. She's being pretentious. The abyssal prefect glanced indifferently at the world covered in cracks. We can continue refining Jingqing. A piece of trash like a plain fragment isn't as pure as Jingqing's laws. We can't. If we can't refine Jingqing, the entire sea will be refined by Jingqing. That's a huge problem. Taishu shook his head. Let's prolong this battle a bit longer. Collect the corpses. /BK. Chapter 2297. This is like drinking poison to quench one's thirst. There are too many harmful effects. The plane that is born will be deformed, His Excellency said. There is no new way to open up a new channel. This is the only way. The Grand Elder adjusted his glasses. Ning Shu waited at the entrance of the tent. After waiting for a long time, His Excellency had no intention of coming out. She didn't know what they were talking about inside. Ning Shu rubbed her hands. His Excellency asked her to wait. Was there a surprise? Ning Shu had a little hope in her heart, but she didn't dare to have too much hope. The greater the hope, the greater the disappointment. By now, Ning Shu's mood had calmed down a little. She was already prepared to give up the peerless martial arts. There was nothing she could do. Even if she wanted to fake it, she was afraid that she would lose her life before she could even start. Only when she was strong would she have the qualifications to be willful. Ning Shu silently swallowed this breath and used it to support herself. She didn't regret sacrificing the peerless martial arts. In the situation at that time, perhaps a big shot would be free to deal with the giant monster, but by the time the big shot made a move, she might already be dead. It might take a very long time to find a new world carrier. Ning Shu felt that she no longer had the essence, energy, and spirit to build a living world. The peerless martial arts had consumed all her energy and expectations. Ning Shu couldn't describe how she felt if she used other martial arts, but they weren't peerless martial arts. When His Excellency came out of the tent, Ning Shu went to greet him. His Excellency handed the peerless martial arts to Ning Shu. Ning Shu was very surprised. She quickly took it and asked, "What do you need me to do? What can you do?" "To be honest, I don't like people chattering in front of me, especially those who aren't tolerated by me. I've always thought that humans are really strange. After pretending to be human for so long, they still don't understand. On one hand, they shout that they want to be proud, but on the other hand, they try to squeeze into a circle that doesn't belong to them. On the other hand, they think that other people are selfish, narrow-minded, ungentlemanly, and don't care about your feelings." Abyssal Prefect looked at Ning Shu. "Your current behavior is particularly annoying. Do you think you're the only one who's sacrificing yourself? So many people have lost their lives, and you still have the right to chirp here. You think you're doing it for others, but it's actually all for yourself. Furthermore, my bones died in front of you." Ning Shu was speechless. Ning Shu looked up at the Abyssal Prefect. "So, what's the meaning of this? Isn't this what you want?" The Abyssal Prefect asked coldly. "Then what's the price I have to pay?" Ning Shu asked with a smile. She wasn't angry at the Abyssal Prefect's words, and there was nothing to be angry about. Some people had the ability to show off their wealth. I have the ability to reject you and live a good life in my own world. I can reject the people I hate and the way I live. For example, the Grand Uncle and the Abyssal Prefect, I don't need to care about other people's opinions. I don't care what other people think of me. If you gnash your teeth in hatred, it's nothing more than envy, jealousy, and hatred. You can't be so carefree. So what if I'm doing this? I'm already very humble. Why should I bow and scrape?" Ning Shu said. There was no need for him to pretend to be humble at all. The Abyssal Prefect took out a black flower and played with it in his hand. "It seems that I'm meddling in other people's business. No. Actually, I don't know how to thank you. This thing is indeed a disaster in my hands. I don't know when the world will collapse. You said that people love vanity, but people also have things and feelings that they can't give up. I'll also hand this thing over. It just so happens that I developed feelings for this thing and wanted to save it. If I can't save it, I can only grieve and accept it," Ning Shu said with a smile and spread out her hands. She said it casually. The Abyssal Prefect pinned the black flower to Ning Shu's ear and looked at it. Then, he shook his head. "Your behavior is seen by others as not knowing when to stop. You're playing with everyone's lives. It's worth it to kill you and save more people. I'll work hard so that others won't dare to kill me," Ning Shu said with a smile. "Although I don't know what price you have to pay to get this thing back, what do you need me to do? Do you want me to be your errand boy?" The Abyssal Prefect, thank you for not telling me directly that I'm not even qualified to be your errand boy," Ning Shu said while holding back his laughter. Her strength wasn't even comparable to Bonehead. She wasn't qualified to be his errand boy. But this will collapse soon. I can't deal with it. Ning Shu handed the peerless martial art to the Abyssal Prefect. "That's why you humans are so strange. You were crying before, but now that you have it, you're acting like this. Ning Shu, humans are the embodiment of all contradictions. This world will be swallowed up sooner or later. I can't save it." Ning Shu touched the peerless martial art that was full of cracks. "Ask Grand Uncle for the other things." Ning Shu's mouth twitched. He definitely couldn't get it. He wouldn't allow such a dangerous thing to be with her. If he spoke again, it would only embarrass himself. There was no point in talking. If he could succeed, then the dangerous item would be confiscated. From the beginning until now, all the decisions were made by himself. Ning Shu's heart was calm. He didn't ask why. He just wanted to survive. Wasn't the original intention of sacrificing the peerless martial art to survive? If he continued to be entangled, it would only destroy the mental barrier he had been building. If it was so easy to break, then why did he insist on climbing up? I'm really tired of the hypocrisy of humans, the abyssal prefect said indifferently. Ning Shu smiled and watched as the abyssal prefect walked through the black carved door. He looked down at the peerless martial art in his hand, lifted the curtain, and walked into the tent. He placed the peerless martial art on the table and said to Granduncle, "You can deal with this." Granduncle glanced at Ning Shu coldly and waved his hand to let him leave. Ning Shu turned and hesitated for a moment before turning to leave the tent. When he left, he couldn't tell if he was disappointed or happy. Ning Shu felt that this feeling was even more annoying than losing money. He estimated that he would be depressed for a while. He would be weak, tired, and wouldn't want to move. Ning Shu swayed back to the place where the Law Incarnation was stationed. The Cheongsam man straightened his back and looked full of energy. He held a fan and waved it coquettishly. He guessed that he had collected a lot of taxes. The Cheongsam man was quite happy. When he saw Ning Shu floating towards him like a dark cloud, he immediately restrained his smile. He didn't want to provoke a lunatic. Everyone went back to collect taxes? Ning Shu asked. The Cheongsam man nodded. I talked to them in every way possible. I almost hugged their legs and cried before they let us go back to collect taxes. Thanks to the soaring prices, my taxes this time are quite high. I should be able to live for a while. It was worth it to shamelessly beg them, /BK. Chapter 2299. Now she had the peerless martial art, but she still had to hand it over because it was about to shatter. Ning Shu had never been so self-deprecating. Everything was because of her lack of ability. Ning Shu felt that her originally steel-like heart was about to turn into slag. She couldn't stand this back and forth. Instead of destroying this world, it's more valuable to let it exist. The Granduncle took out a stone and placed it on the table. This is a boundary stone. It can strengthen the world. As for this, the Granduncle had a shiny stone in his hand. This stone was as beautiful as a star. This can stop the law of nothingness from devouring the world. Ning Shu looked at these two things and jumped back in fright. She asked warily, "Why are you suddenly giving me these?" Previously, she couldn't even discuss it. Now, she was suddenly returned to her and these treasures. Ning Shu was horrified. The sudden warmth made Ning Shu want to kneel down. She couldn't adapt to suddenly becoming so humane. She had been abused too much. One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Ning Shu calmed down. Her world might be saved, but this was the price she had to pay. What do I have to pay? 100 years of taxes from Water City and Wood City. The Granduncle said. 100 years, taxes would be collected twice a year. Each time, it would be close to 2 million. A year, it would be 4 million. Wood City's taxes were slightly higher, 5 million a year. The two cities added together would be 10 million. 100 years, Ning Shu had to calculate. 1 billion. Didn't you say you could pay any price and not take your life? The Granduncle said. Ning Shu nodded. I'm willing. The time will start after the war ends. Now, fighting requires faith power. Okay. The Granduncle nodded. Ning Shu stretched out her hand and put away the peerless martial art and the two stones on the table. 1 billion to buy 2 stones. Ning Shu asked, how do I use them? Boundary stones can be absorbed by the world. This stone can be directly thrown into the law of nothingness. It will form a membrane at the bottom, preventing the law of nothingness from absorbing the world. However, it won't last forever. The stone itself will be devoured, said the Grand Elder. Ning Shu made an "oh" sound, tightly hugged the broken peerless martial art, and asked, this time you really returned the world to me. If he had to hand it over again, Ning Shu would explode, who knows what he would do. Take care of your world. If there is no void, then let it overflow, Ning Shu nodded. She hugged the peerless martial art book and left the tent. She didn't want to come to this place anymore. Here, she didn't even have the right to speak. However, the world was finally back. For some reason, the Grand Elder changed his mind. After a few twists and turns, he would never abandon this world again. With his life and death in the hands of others, Ning Shu didn't even want to think about the price he had to pay to transcend. Her emotions were being controlled by someone else. Ning Shu returned to the system space. Since the battle hadn't started yet, he quickly went back to consolidate the world. She let the peerless martial art absorb the barrier stone. Even after absorbing the peerless martial art was still full of cracks. After entering the world, Ning Shu looked at the law of nothingness and threw the beautiful starlight stone in. He had to collect more of these stones in the future. Ning Shu squatted beside the law of nothingness and looked at the clear law of nothingness. This thing was even more terrifying than water. It could devour everything. Was there really nothing that could restrain it? With the starlight stone's isolation, the world's pressure was reduced. Next, he had to repair the peerless martial art book. Should he use the boundary stones? They could only strengthen the world, but they couldn't repair these cracks. Ning Shu took out the peerless martial art book and condensed a basin of emerald green liquid. He placed the peerless martial art book in the basin and soaked it in the liquid filled with vitality. He didn't know if it could be repaired, but the chances weren't high. Should he find the source of the world again? Should he use the source of the world to repair it? Anyway, he didn't know what to do. Ning Shu carried the basin back to the battlefield. He didn't dare to place it in the world of reincarnation as he didn't know if it would have any negative effects. He didn't know what to do. The Cheongsam guy reached into the basin and washed his hands. This feels great. Using the water condensed from the law of water and wood to absorb it. Ning Shu used his hands to water the floating peerless martial art book. Ning Shu felt like he had let it down. He gave it up time and time again and came back. He wouldn't let it go anymore. Next time, he would die together with it. Ning Shu hummed a tune and felt like there was nothing to be afraid of. He felt like his entire body was injected with chicken blood. He felt very at ease and also very touched. Even if this war continued, Ning Shu felt like he could hold on. Creak creak creak, Ning Shu pulled out his spear and the blade on his back. He squatted down. If he made more contributions, he might be able to get a treasure to repair the world. Come on. There were no bones left. It had turned into ashes. Ning Shu was too embarrassed to ask for help from His Excellency. He could only rely on himself. Monsters flooded out. Ning Shu looked at these monsters and his eyes turned red. He directly killed them and left as many corpses as he could to accumulate military contributions. Maybe because the law incarnations went back to collect taxes and had more money, they were willing to use their ultimate skills and annihilate groups of monsters. There were also people who preserved the corpses of monsters to accumulate military contributions. Without Bonehead's help, Ning Shu didn't have many corpses. He could only accumulate a little. Also, the weapons that Mo Ming helped him get probably cost him a lot of military contributions. He had to return them. If he owed them for a long time, the favor would get bigger and bigger. At least after the war ended, he had to return it. Maybe Mo Ming could rely on military contributions to get promoted. It was better to get promoted. If he didn't get promoted, he would only be cannon fodder. There was no room for discussion. The exhaustion, weakness, and reluctance to move from before had all disappeared. He fought bravely to kill the enemy for his own world. The Cheongsam guy thought the woman beside him was really crazy. She was so happy and sad that she kept killing monsters. Women were really scary. The woman he loved, the woman beside him, and Ah Wan would burn him. He felt that the chances of him getting a girlfriend were even lower. Were all female mission enforcers so crazy? Their emotions fluctuated. His Excellency stood beside Grand Uncle. You gave her the world again. It's a world of faith power. It's okay to keep it. It's useless. Grand Uncle said coldly. It's just struggling at death's door. To be able to destroy a world of faith power like this, she's really stupid. His Excellency said. I still feel that we should erase Qingqing's intelligence and try to build a new sea of law as soon as possible. His Excellency said sadly. Grand Uncle didn't say anything. His Excellency looked at the battlefield. The longer we delay, the worse it will be. The situation won't get better because of your reluctance. It's not that I'm reluctant, /BK. Chapter 2300. Ning Shu was full of energy. He collected the corpses of monsters that were immune to law power. These corpses would give him military merits. If he had enough military merits, Ning Shu didn't expect to develop in the military, but he wanted starlight stones, those beautiful stones. He just didn't know if he could buy them at the auction except for the Grand Uncle. Ning Shu was full of adrenaline, but he also noticed that this war was getting more and more sluggish. Although the attacks of the monsters were very powerful and overwhelming, morale was not the same. Maybe the war would end soon, or maybe the monsters had compromised. But it was unlikely that they had. After all, these monsters ate planes as food. If they compromised, they would starve. They had to fight desperately. But now that morale was so low, they probably had other plans. However, this didn't affect Ning Shu's collection of corpses. He didn't know how many military merits could be exchanged for that kind of stone. This kind of thing was not available in the exchange store. As for large organizations like the auction house, he probably had to try his luck. Boom, boom, boom. The Soul Army fired countless cannons. These cannons were a little strange. When they landed in the group of monsters, they only exploded, but they didn't do any damage. These monsters were all fine. The sound wave attack didn't seem like a sound wave attack. He didn't know what kind of attack it was. Was it a radiation attack? Biochemical attacks shouldn't hurt these monsters much. Squeak, squeak, squeak. It was the signal to retreat. A large number of monsters began to retreat. Squeak, 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 squeak. When the monsters retreated, the monsters near Ning Shu turned back and wanted to take Ning Shu away. Ning Shu directly shot and killed the monsters that wanted to kidnap him. Did these monsters love her and want to take her back to be their wife? She's so ugly. Forget it. Why did they retreat so quickly this time? Compared to the previous struggle, the attack time this time was very short. What's wrong with these monsters? Ning Shu pursed his lips. He felt that he hadn't had enough yet. He hadn't collected the corpses yet, and he hadn't received any military merits. Without military merits, the probability of getting a starlight stone was negative. 100 years of tax revenue. If he held on for another 100 years, that would be 200 years without any harvest. During this period, if he encountered any treasures that were worth selling, what would he do if he ran out of money? Taking the initiative to do something was different from taking the initiative to do something passively. Right now, Ning Shu wasn't afraid of rats. If he really couldn't hold on, he could use his peerless martial arts and let the law of nothingness devour him. However, doing so might cause harm to the world. Moreover, the law of nothingness that had swallowed things would slowly grow larger, speeding up the devouring of the starlight stone. Therefore, unless it was absolutely necessary, Ning Shu did not dare to use the peerless martial art that had cracks all over its body. Ning Shu treasured this thing that had returned to her after so many twists and turns. Perhaps it could never be repaired, but Ning Shu was willing to keep it by her side. There were some things that were always by her side that she did not feel, but when she lost them, it would be a heart-wrenching pain. The power that the peerless martial arts brought her was irreplaceable in her heart. Companionship was the longest form of confession. Ning Shu felt that he might have developed a fetish. This battle had a strong start but a weak finish. After the spirit army had released that kind of artillery, the monsters had retreated. Ning Shu was still very vague about the various weapons of the military. Besides, he couldn't exchange for these weapons with the law of nothingness. He didn't even have the chance to see them. The military came to collect the corpses. Ning Shu looked at the other party calculating the military merits. Then, he took the slip of paper and looked at it. Ning Shu was speechless. 8 merit points. Damn it. It was less than 2 digits. Although the number was auspicious, it was not as practical as 44 merit points. What was the use of being auspicious? He was still thinking of returning Mo Ming's military merits. At the current speed, who knew when he would return Mo Ming's military merits? He still had to accumulate enough merit points to exchange for starlight stones. Ning Shu pulled his hair. What the fuck? Ning Shu looked at the paper in the Chongsam man's hand. 5 points. The Chongsam man rolled his eyes. Not bad. 5 points can exchange for 5 weapons. Although it looks shabby, it's still not bad. Other than Ning Shu and the Chongsam man, the other law of nothingness weren't that bad either. After all, the law of nothingness relied on weapons. These weapons directly annihilated the monsters' corpses. If they wanted to keep the monsters' corpses, they had to use unconventional methods to kill the monsters and snatch the corpses from the monsters' hands. This wasn't an easy task. Previously, with Bonehead around, he could get more than 90 merit points after a battle. Compared to now, it was like heaven and earth. Ning Shu facepalmed. He really wasn't qualified to be the underling of an abyssal prefect. The law of nothingness who had obtained merit points had all gone to exchange for weapons. Ning Shu kept the slip of paper and slowly accumulated merit points. Ning Shu squatted down and watered the supreme martial art that was soaking in the basin. Fortunately, the supreme martial art was no longer paper. If it was paper, it would have turned into pulp. Touching the cracks, Ning Shu sighed. He had to treat it well in the future. Ning Shu still wanted to ask why he let go of the supreme martial art. After all, his previous attitude was very firm, and there was no room for negotiation. Now, he had given 2 stones. Although he had spent 100 years of the law of nothingness city's taxes, Ning Shu wanted to know the reason. Picking up the supreme martial art, Ning Shu looked at it over and over again. Could it be that there was something special about it? She was short-sighted. When it was time to use it, she regretted not having enough knowledge. You're not going to exchange for weapons? The Chongsam man asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu shook his head. Only now did he feel that exchanging 10 merit points for a broadsword was really fucking extravagant. The Chongsam man sat down and washed his hands in the basin. Don't wash in my basin. You'll get dirty if you wash it. How could he let the supreme martial art absorb such dirty water? The Chongsam man was speechless. He was simply crazy. How was it dirty? Don't pour it, it's splashing me. The Chongsam man saw that Ning Shu was about to pour the water and immediately said. Ning Shu. Of course I'll fulfill your request. Ning Shu condensed the emerald green liquid again and soaked the supreme martial art in it. Although the water was full of vitality, it wasn't of much help to the supreme martial art. There were still so many cracks, and it didn't decrease at all. It seemed that ordinary things couldn't repair it, but what could be useful? Ning Shu felt that he was very ignorant, like a retard. Moreover, some things and inside information were in the hands of the upper echelons, just like ancient books were in the hands of the aristocratic families. It seemed that he had to spend some money to consult a professional. Ning Shu propped up his chin and looked at the book in the basin, feeling very satisfied. Another naked person came out of the black hole and asked to talk. /BK. Chapter 2301. Ning Shu's heart didn't waver. Anyway, this was the faceless man's business. The monsters would fight, collect military merits, and find a way to repair her world. As for the result of the discussion, it wasn't something she could control. It was just a small soldier. If the faceless man said to fight, they would fight. If the faceless man said to retreat, they would retreat immediately. There was no discussion. Ning Shu touched her dress with her fingers. She couldn't even change the color of the dress. Ning Shu still liked white dresses. They looked very fairy-like. The red color was too eye-catching. It was very conspicuous in a group of people. It didn't match Ning Shu's low-key character. The discussion was still going on in the tent. Imagine a group of people facing a naked man or a woman. The scene was a bit high energy. It was unimaginable. The naked gray-haired man came out of the tent with a strange accent. "I hope you will reconsider." The Grand Elder said coldly, "There's no need to reconsider." "Then are we going to fight like this?" The gray-haired man said. "Continue." The gray-haired man was a bit depressed. "Aren't the conditions good enough?" "It's okay," the Grand Elder said indifferently. "If it's okay, why don't you agree?" The gray-haired man asked doubtfully. "Then continue," the gray-haired man said. "You're inhumane. Why did you use radiation shells and sterilize the soldiers? You're not even human. How can you be humane? You should thank us. Your reproductive cancer needs to be treated. You've reproduced too much. Don't eat the plane. Eat yourself," the Grand Elder said indifferently. The gray-haired man was silent for a while. He was obviously choked by the other party's self-righteous attitude. Ning Shu saw the gray-haired man enter the black hole. The army was still on guard. It seemed that they would continue to fight. Ning Shu didn't feel anything. There were military merits in fighting and he could get starlight stones. After the gray-haired man went back, the monsters started to attack. Ning Shu attacked with his big knife. For military merits, Ning Shu tried to preserve the monsters' bodies. To be honest, this battle was really boring. He didn't know what kind of deal was involved. The monsters were huge in size and came in all shapes and sizes. They spat saliva everywhere and gnawed on things everywhere. In short, why didn't these things gnaw on each other? Why did they have to eat planes? When Ning Shu's arm came into contact with the monster's saliva, he immediately felt his soul burning. The saliva was quickly eating away at his soul. Ning Shu swung his broadsword and cut off his arm to prevent his entire soul from being corroded. It was very painful to cut off one's soul, so Ning Shu reformed an arm. However, his soul was a bit dimmer, and the soul power in his arm was gone. Most of the monsters that were sent out this time were spitting saliva from their mouths. They were densely packed in the air and were spitting saliva at them. Some were not handled in time, or their entire souls were splashed by the lava. They could only howl in agony as they were corroded. A monster that could even digest a plane. How terrifying would its digestive ability be? Ning Shu took out his gun and fired at these monsters. However, these monsters' bodies seemed to be set up with a barrier that couldn't be broken at all. Ning Shu fired several shots in a row, but there was no way to break the opponent's defense. Ning Shu felt a little bad. This monster's defensive ability was the same as the previous giant monster that she had locked in the world and swallowed by the void. Their main weapons were guns, and they used the power of faith to attack. However, now that guns were useless, their attack power was greatly reduced. This was not a good sign. Ning Shu swung his great sword and released a strong sword aura. It only hit the monster's body but did not cause any damage. "Ah, it hurts," some people's souls were corroded by the lava spat out by the monsters. Ning Shu felt that the two sides in the battle were too familiar with each other. They had ways to deal with the monsters, but the monsters also had ways to deal with these souls. In particular, these monsters could choose the direction of evolution. They knew how to use the power of faith to attack, and the other side had defensive means to defend against the power of faith. In round after round of war, they understood each other. It was estimated that neither side could do anything to the other, but this war was still going on, which meant that there was a reason to continue. The Cheongsam man used his fan to disperse the waterfall like lava. Some of the lava stained his fan, and the fan made a sizzling sound. The Cheongsam man's face turned ugly. He was cold and ruthless, and he fired at these monsters like a madman. Ah! More and more people were killed by the lava. If the law incarnation died, even the law imprint would be melted. Ning Shu cursed in his heart. While dodging the lava, he fired at them. He used almost all of his methods. There must be a side that boosted the monster's defense. Why could she, as a healer, only recover health but not defense and attack power? The people on this side were constantly depleted, and the monsters on the other side had to shoot a lot to break the defense and kill the monsters. However, during this period, the monsters had already spat out lava many times. Ning Shu fished out the dripping peerless martial arts from the basin and activated it. A powerful suction force erupted from the world, sucking these spitting monsters into the world. Ning Shu hurriedly entered the world, wrapped the monsters with vines, and threw them into the law of nothingness. These monsters' defensive abilities were really strong. After being thrown into the law of nothingness, they could still flap their wings and struggle with all their might. The law of nothingness could not devour so many monsters in a short period of time. However, after being touched by the law of nothingness, it was like falling into a swamp. Even if they struggled, they would not be able to break free. These monsters spat out lava in fear, and the law of nothingness was dyed by the lava. It was like a pool of blood, but it was quickly devoured, and the water became clear. Ning Shu watched as the monsters were devoured. He felt that the law of nothingness seemed to have grown bigger. It had expanded a little, and it was more harmful to the world. The corrosion of the starlight stone had sped up. However, Ning Shu really had no way to deal with these monsters with turtle shells on their backs. He could only use the law of nothingness to save his life. More and more monsters were sucked into the world. The law of nothingness was filled with flapping monsters. Ning Shu stood guard by the shore to prevent monsters from crawling out and eating the peerless martial arts. Ning Shu had mixed feelings about the law of nothingness. This thing threatened the world, but he had no choice but to rely on it to kill enemies. While killing enemies, it was also strengthening it. It was even more harmful to the world. It was really helpless. Ning Shu came out of the world and looked at it. He was afraid that the world would collapse. This world could not bear the burden, but she still wanted to use it to kill enemies. /BK Chapter 2302 Ning Shu felt that this world might not be able to wait until the day he repaired it. If it continued like this, the world might not be able to hold on for long. The other party was a terrifying race of reproductive cancer. They ate high-end food. Once the plane was broken, all the creatures inside would suffer. Not only that, there would also be a chain reaction like firecrackers. The monsters were constantly being sucked into the world. Ning Shu stared at the world. When he saw that the cracks on the surface of the peerless martial art did not increase, he heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed that the barrier stone had some effect. It had strengthened the world. Without these spitting monsters, the pressure on everyone was reduced. Ning Shu killed the monsters that did not have such strong defense. He chopped and collected the corpses. Other than the spitting monsters with strong defense, the other monsters could be killed with guns and the power of faith. Ning Shu did not put them into the world. Ning Shu was trembling with fear. He was afraid that the world could not hold on. If it could not hold on, the law of nothingness would overflow. Everyone would be finished. He used a few big moves in a row to clean up the surrounding monsters. However, the monsters would come back like a tide. Many shells landed on the monsters. Ning Shu suspected that these shells were duds. They could not cause any damage to the monsters. The monsters were still alive and would attack when they were needed. Ning Shu scratched his head. He did not understand. The Chongsam man's mood was not right. He stared at his fan in a daze. Ning Shu helped him kill a few monsters that rushed over. He kicked him. What cat disease? Cat disease was probably contagious. First it was her, now it was the Chongsam man. The Chongsam man's expression was cold. That cold look looked like a flirting face. Ning Shu glanced at the fan in his hand. More than half of the fan was corroded. Your girlfriend gave it to you. Ning Shu was talking about the girlfriend who died for the Chongsam man. Yes. The Chongsam man grinned. He used the broken fan to hit the monster's head. The monster's head exploded into a cloud of blood. All these years, I've been repairing this fan, but these bastards actually destroyed it, the Chongsam man said sinisterly. Ning Shu did not have much to say about this. Even if he wanted to say something, it was easy for him to say it. However, the scene of her crying not long ago was still vivid in his mind. He really could not boil chicken soup for the heart of the Chongsam man. Fortunately, there's still half of it. I can repair it. With her world, he had a thought to repair it. Could it be that repairing a fan was more difficult than repairing a world? The Chongsam man raised his gun and fired at the monsters for a long time. Ning Shu's eyelids twitched. How much faith did he need? But the Chongsam man was rich. Ning Shu hurriedly entered his own world and looked at the law of nothingness devouring the monsters. He felt that the law of nothingness had become a bit bigger. Could this be considered helping the enemy? She clearly knew that once the law of nothingness grew stronger, it would devour peerless martial arts. Ning Shu sincerely prayed that the war would end soon. Moreover, during the war, there were constantly planes being broken through. In the end, their side suffered more losses. At most, a batch of monsters would die. However, there were also souls dying here. There were also planes and reincarnation worlds that were broken through. From His Excellency's tone, the initiative was on their side. However, their side suffered more losses. Countless worlds had devoured countless monsters. Coupled with the law of nothingness's endless attacks, they should be able to hold on according to this trend. As for whether they could hold on in the next round, it was up to fate. Every time they attacked, someone would die. Ning Shu did not ask for anything else. He only hoped to survive in the war. Surviving was the greatest victory. Dong dong dong. 3 huge humanoid monsters crawled out of the black hole. Seeing these 3 monsters, Ning Shu thought of the fear of losing her world. It was such monsters that had shattered her world. Now, they were coming again. Ning Shu had thought that such monsters should be few in number. It should not be easy to cultivate them. Now, 3 more had appeared. Ning Shu's face was burning. She had been slapped in the face so quickly. This time, were they coming here again? Were they going to put such huge monsters in her world again? Ning Shu clenched his fists. His palms seemed to be covered in cold sweat. What kind of hatred did she have with these monsters? Why did these monsters have to target her like this? The peerless martial arts floated above Ning Shu's head. It rotated, and its surface was full of cracks. Fortunately, these 3 monsters did not come here. As soon as the monsters appeared, His Excellency and Senior Uncle both attacked. His Excellency's figure became as big as the giant monster. He was as ferocious and terrifying as the monster. He raised a fork that was as big as a heavenly pillar and pierced through the monster's neck. With another flick, the monster's head was sent flying. The giant monster fell with a bang. As soon as the monster fell, many bones gathered together. The giant skeleton carried the monster's corpse away. At the same time, the monster's head was also taken away. A black hole appeared behind Senior Uncle. The black hole condensed into a black sword. Senior Uncle held the sword. The black sword energy burst out and directly penetrated the monster's body. The monster's body was cut into several pieces. Senior Uncle's hands were gloved. He grabbed the monster's body parts and threw them to the back of the army. The monster's body was very big. Senior Uncle's body was like a small ant. However, the ant lifted a huge stone and threw it far away. Ning Shu was speechless. For her, there was no fear. She could only fight with her life. These people were killed in a flash. She was really weak. If she was alive, it was hard to guarantee that she would not participate in the next war. Would she be so tired next time? Ning Shu felt a deep sense of shame. He felt that what he had done was simply a joke. The three giant monsters were killed in a flash. Ning Shu hoped that one day he could be so powerful. A wave of naked people came out of the black hole. These people were naked and had no gender. They were lined up in rows. There were about 100 of them, and each of them looked indifferent. When Ning Shu saw these people, he suddenly felt that this should be the last touch of the war. These people had sickle-like weapons in their hands. They carried the sickles and ran at high speed. This time, the big shots of the military and some more powerful mission enforcers who were stationed on the battlefield joined the battle. Ning Shu saw that the silver-haired man's paper was cut into two halves by the scythe, and immediately shrunk his neck. Oh my God, these people did not use any fancy attacks, but they used the scythe to cut through the world. The silver-haired man, who lost a piece of paper, had a cold expression. This kind of high-end battle was not something Ning Shu could understand. /BK Chapter 2303. Ning Shu wasn't able to sense the competition between the various forces. Ning Shu killed the monsters while paying attention to the situation over there. Fortunately, with the help of the world, the pressure wasn't so great. Some people with scythes were killed, and their corpses were immediately collected by this side. They were really crazy about collecting corpses. The Soul Army kept firing duds. As long as the cannonballs landed, the surroundings would be empty. These monsters seemed to be afraid of the duds and stayed far away from them. Ning Shu even saw a look of horror on the monsters' faces that couldn't be seen clearly. Were the cannonballs really that terrible? These people with scythes were all killed in the end, but there were also sacrifices here. Some monsters took advantage of the high-level battle and directly broke through the defense and gnawed on many planes. Keep firing cannonballs for me, fire as many as you can. The huge Yiksha made a terrifying roar. It seemed that His Excellency had gone mad. As soon as His Excellency's voice fell, countless cannonballs flew out, covering every place on the battlefield. Some cannonballs even landed at the feet of Ning Shu. When the monsters saw the cannonballs, they all dodged. Even if the cannonballs were already in front of them, they gave up attacking and desperately retreated. Ning Shu looked at the cannonball. The cannonball exploded with a bang, but the sound wave was a little stronger. Other than that, he didn't feel anything. It could make the monsters so scared. Ning Shu really wanted to hold such a cannonball and throw it in his hand. It could make the monsters pee in their pants. But the cannonballs were still very expensive. Squeak. A very penetrating cry, mixed with this anger, directly annihilated those with weaker souls. Ning Shu covered her ears. She felt as if her soul was about to dissipate from this tremor. Her soul was about to scatter. What a terrifying sound wave. When these monsters heard the cry, one by one, they were so scared that they crawled on the ground, trembling. What are you shouting for? Fragrant Wind Man scolded directly, blocking the sound wave with a barrier. Hearing Fragrant Wind Man's words, the army behind her roared with laughter. Soldiers, ruffians, even if they became souls, in fact, they were the same. When they were not serious, they were the same. The monsters started to retreat. Ning Shu felt that when the monsters retreated, they looked especially lifeless. Their bodies emitted a sad aura. Ning Shu soaked the peerless martial art in the basin and escaped another calamity. The two sides were becoming more and more serious. Being serious meant that the end of the war was near, but it also meant that the situation was getting more and more dangerous. He didn't know if he could survive. The man in the Cheongsam looked at the remaining half of the fan and fell into deep thought for a long time. He was probably reminiscing about the past. Ning Shu stared at his world and fell into deep thought for a long time. Sigh, Ning Shu looked up and saw the abyssal prefect standing in front of her. Ning Shu stood up. What's the matter? The abyssal prefect's expression was unsightly. In fact, it was extremely ugly. A handful of soul pearls appeared in his hand. Ning Shu was speechless. Roughly speaking, there were more than 10 of them, which meant that more than 10 world of samsara had been destroyed. The world of samsara had already lost so much. Ning Shu still didn't want to know where that plane was. Seeing that the abyssal prefect was in a bad mood, Ning Shu silently picked up the basin and followed the abyssal prefect to the 9-Palace Mountain. The abyssal prefect glanced at the basin that Ning Shu was holding and was speechless for a long time. What's the principle of soaking in water? I can't find anything that can be repaired. I can only use bubbles that have some vitality. Ning Shu felt that he might have done something stupid again, but he still said it with a smile. The world is like a broken fish. It can't be caught or absorbed. What's the use of soaking in water? Ning Shu. It's a psychological comfort. I think it might be useful. When they reached the 9th level of the 9-Palace Mountain, the abyssal prefect placed more than 10 soul pearls in the rebirth pool. Ning Shu asked the abyssal prefect, is there any way to form the rebirth pool faster? No. Everything has its own rules of growth. How can a baby suddenly grow up? It needs time and the accumulation of energy. The abyssal prefect said directly. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. At least he had placed more than 10 soul pearls this time. It should be fine to ask the abyssal prefect a few questions. He was thick-skinned. What's the use of those cannonballs? I can see that those monsters are very scared. Ning Shu asked. If he didn't ask clearly, he wouldn't be able to eat. No, he would feel uncomfortable all over. For a race that has reproductive cancer and can't reproduce, they are useless. The purpose of their existence is to reproduce. This is the worldview of insects. The corpses of insects that can't reproduce won't be eaten by their own race. They will be disposed of. Ning Shu, so the cannonballs killed the monster's reproductive abilities? These cannonballs were good. Even if those monsters retreated, they might still be cleaned up. Ning Shu asked again, then what's the purpose of collecting the corpses? The abyssal prefect glanced at Ning Shu but didn't say anything. Isn't that something I should know? Ning Shu changed the topic, why did my world return? Do you have 100,000 whys? The abyssal prefect frowned, don't you know the situation of your own world? Ning Shu said frankly, I'm stupid. I really don't know. That's why I'm asking you. I hope you can tell me, since you provided me with the 9-Palace Mountain. The abyssal prefect. A world of faith is a world that is formed by someone continuously providing the world with the power of faith. Normal worlds are more resilient and have the ability to protect themselves. Ning Shu rubbed his head. He finally had some recollection. Back then, When she asked the silver-haired man about the ultimate martial arts, the silver-haired man casually said that a world of faith could form a world. At that time, she only paid attention to the second half of the sentence, which was that it could form a world. Then, she excitedly began her journey to build a world. So, if only she had asked more about what it was about, it would have been a world of faith. Ning Shu realized that the silver-haired man was full of traps. How many traps could he leave behind with one sentence? Even if he wanted to build a world, he wouldn't even tell her the world's origin in one go. What a black-hearted profiteer. Speaking of which, Ning Shu hadn't been able to collect taxes from the silver-haired man even once. Then, there was only one question left. The abyssal prefect didn't answer what was the use of collecting monster corpses. Was it for eating? Just thinking about it made Ning Shu's stomach feel a little uncomfortable. Is Jingqing alright? The abyssal prefect Ning Shu asked. Jingqing. Ning Shu thought for a long time, but he didn't have any recollection of Jingqing. I don't know anyone called Jingqing. The abyssal prefect smiled meaningfully. Ning Shu, actually, collecting corpses is for the Sea of Law. The abyssal prefect suddenly said, the Sea of Law has existed for too long. Nothing can escape the ravages of time. What happened to the Sea of Law? The Sea of Law was the place where planes were born. If there was a problem with the Sea of Law, would there be a problem with the plane too? After all, it was the source. The Sea of Law no longer gives birth to laws. Without laws and rules, it can't give birth to new planes. There are also planes that need to evolve and absorb rules. The Sea of Law can't provide them. It's like the roots of a tree that can't absorb nutrients for the branches and leaves. Ning Shu. Why did he suddenly tell her this again? /BK. Chapter 2305. She could only owe Mo Ming this favor. When the time came, she would ask Mo Ming what he needed and return the favor. Bonehead had helped her the most, but she wasn't as powerful as Bonehead. Ning Shu, go to the tent. A messenger came to inform Ning Shu. Ning Shu. She didn't want to go. This was clearly a negotiation between the higher-ups. Why would she go? If she couldn't squeeze into this circle, then so be it. What's wrong with you? People ask you to go to the tent every few days. The man in the Cheongsam raised his eyebrows. Ning Shu. I also want to know what's wrong with me. I feel like a clown. Go. It might not be a good thing. The man in the Cheongsam said. Ning Shu. Why do we have to hurt each other like this? She followed the messenger to the tent. Ning Shu was very scared and didn't want to go in. Who knew if it would threaten her life? She survived on the battlefield, but she didn't expect to die at the last moment. Ning Shu's imagination came up with all kinds of conspiracies. In the end, she succeeded in scaring herself to death. Come in. A voice came from the tent. Ning Shu hesitated and lifted the curtain. The table in the middle of the tent was full of people. When Ning Shu entered, everyone stared at her. Ning Shu, Li Wen pulled a chair. Sit here. Ning Shu, the two sides were clearly separated. Was it really suitable for her to sit on the enemy's side? Ning Shu, okay. It didn't matter where she sat. Ning Shu sat beside Li Wen. She stood on her tiptoes and kept shaking her legs. Li Wen glanced at Ning Shu's legs. Sister, how have you been recently? Ning Shu was already numb to her identity being exposed. Moreover, she and Li Wen had met in two different worlds. I'm also doing very well. Ning Shu said. The negotiation continued. Ning Shu and Li Wen chatted. Little Mouse said that he sensed a familiar soul on the other side. When I saw that it was you, I called so many people to ask you to come over for a chat. Ning Shu, Ning Shu was practically gnashing his teeth, and his voice was squeezed out from the gaps between his teeth. I thank you. Ning Shu suddenly felt powerless. He lowered his head and was too lazy to speak. As for who Mouse was, he didn't care who he was. Fragrant Wind was in charge of the main negotiations. Ning Shu's heart was in turmoil as he listened to the negotiations between the two parties. 8 million world essences. Millions of planes. Millions of planes. Ning Shu was speechless. 8 million world origins. Oh, he. Why did she feel that collecting 7 summon mystical dragons was already very difficult? The moment she opened her mouth, she asked for millions of summon mystical dragons. Ning Shu expressed that his horizons had been broadened today. She even wanted a plane. Hearing these demands, Fragrant Wind only had a cold smile on his face. He didn't have a million world origin, but he had 500,000 words. As for planes, he didn't have a single one, but he did have a few million kilograms of plane fragments. If they wanted to talk, they would talk. If they didn't want to talk, they would pull them aside. Fragrant Wind's attitude was very rude and arrogant. He also asked the other party to hand over 1 million bugs. As for these bugs, they would definitely be killed to fill the sea of laws. Actually, Ning Shu felt that this side wanted to continue fighting. They didn't care about peace talks at all. In fact, plain fragments could also be eaten. In fact, the taste should be about the same. However, one was trash, and the other was fresh. They probably had the taste of expired food. The usually broken planes, plain fragments, and plain trash were all collected. There was no way to completely exterminate this race. No matter what, they would have to eat all the planes. They had no choice but to take out some things. The plain fragments contained various rules and heavenly axiom information. However, they weren't as good as a complete plane, but they could still make do. The negotiator on the bug's side was a naked gray-haired man. He was expressionless as he stated various conditions. Li Wen's whole body was filled with a domineering aura. She introduced the man wearing wooden clogs sitting beside her to Ning Shu. He was pretty man, this is Mouse. Oh, Mouse. Ning Shu greeted. She couldn't forget the waves of monsters rushing towards her. The handsome man called Little Mouse looked at Ning Shu from head to toe, rolled his eyes, and moved his gaze away. Ning Shu also rolled her eyes. She listened to the negotiation conditions of the two sides. If possible, she wanted to buy 2 world origins. The light and darkness world origins. Oh, she forgot. Her world was about to collapse. She didn't know if the light and darkness attributes would be useful. Her OCD was about to be completed. Once she gathered 7 world origins, she would be able to summon a world. Why are you living with this race? Ning Shu said to Li Wen. I've seen a lot. I traveled to a lot of places. Then, I settled down there. Ning Shu made an "oh" sound. You participated in this war too? Yes, I participated. Li Wen said calmly. Ning Shu didn't say anything. This was her personal choice and position. Is Mouse the mouse from before? It's him. Ning Shu looked at the pretty man that Li Wen pointed at. The pretty man turned his head. His narrow eyes looked at Ning Shu with disdain. You're a will-o'-the-wisp, yet you want to illuminate others. Ning Shu was speechless. Aren't you condemning Li Wen in your heart? She's a person of this plane, but she's standing here. She's bemoaning the state of the universe and pitying mankind. She wants to stand up for all the planes, the pretty man said. Ning Shu said, how can a person without a dick like you understand my thoughts? Although Ning Shu spoke very softly, she still managed to silence everyone in the tent. Many naked human-shaped insects lowered their heads and looked down at their nether regions. The fragrant man glanced at Ning Shu and continued to negotiate. Ignorant, stupid, disgusting, ugly. The pretty man labeled Ning Shu. Ning Shu mouthed, I don't have a dick. They came to the tent to meet acquaintances. When they left the tent, they would still have to fight. This was not a war between good and evil. For these monsters, these planes were their food. Why couldn't they eat their own food? The other side had to protect the lowly and weak creatures living in their food. They didn't let them eat. Wasn't that abominable? Damn it. Just because they had to protect the insects in the cabbage, they weren't allowed to eat the cabbage. Besides, the insects would eat the cabbage too, okay? These creatures were harmful to the planes. For this side, they had eaten the planes. What were they doing here? The creatures inside were all dead. It was all for survival. Ning Shu only wanted to live and become stronger. No one could take away her life and the things she cherished. As for other things, Ning Shu felt that she was too busy with her own affairs. She didn't have the mood to care about other people's affairs. Ning Shu felt that her aura was incompatible with this mouse. Even if she met the mouse first and couldn't get along well, it likely won. If their auras were incompatible, they wouldn't get along. He rolled his eyes. Ning Shu just put on an unfathomable expression. This expression was almost an all-purpose expression. It could be used in any situation. As for the meaning behind it, she could figure it out herself. The pretty man looked at Ning Shu. Her eyes were very cold. Ning Shu felt that the pretty man must be jealous. The reason was Li Wen. Chapter 2306. When the two sides were almost done talking, the wooden puppet man nodded to the naked negotiator, indicating that the conditions were acceptable. Next, the two sides exchanged their resources. Ning Shu heard the beautiful man say, "Send over the soldiers who were shot." It was the sterilized monster insects that were sent over to fill the Law Sea. Ning Shu just raised his eyebrows. Without the insects, the Law Sea would not be able to maintain the normal operation of the billions of planes, but these monster insects were abandoned just like that. Fortunately, they were not sent over as captives. The higher-ups of these insects were probably afraid that the Law Sea would have problems. If the Law Sea had problems, what would they eat? How would they reproduce? Even if they ate their own kind, there would be a day when they would be eaten up. After the negotiation, Ning Shu left the tent. Li Wen said to Ning Shu, "Sister, what do you plan to do next?" "Li Wen, you want to bring this ghost fire guy to my land? I definitely won't agree. I don't want to hear every day, 'You're cruel, you're heartless, you're inhumane.'" The wooden puppet man suddenly exploded. "Ning Shu, TSK, you're so angry. I'm not going." Ning Shu said to Li Wen. Li Wen did not force Ning Shu at all, she just casually said, "What do you want?" The beautiful man's eyes were like steel blades that scraped Ning Shu. "If you dare to ask for anything, I'll let my subordinates tear you to pieces." "I'm so scared." After the war was over, she would hide in the back. There were so many soul armies stationed in the front. "Why are you doing this?" Ning Shu asked Li Wen. "Just treat it as returning a favor. What do you want?" Li Wen asked. "Can I really do anything?" Ning Shu rubbed his hands and asked. "Li Wen." The wooden puppet man looked at him with raised eyebrows. Ning Shu, he was full of dog food. If these two had nothing to do with each other, Ning Shu would use the Chongsam man's fan as a bet. "Give me the light and darkness elemental world's origin." Although they didn't know why Li Wen wanted to return a favor, they couldn't talk about favors. Mei Nan's angry expression abruptly stopped, then she smiled triumphantly and said to Li Wen, "Just give her 2 worlds origins, don't interact with her anymore in the future." In any case, the other party had already compensated a few million worlds origins. Ning Shu felt a chill run down his spine. This was the first time he had seen such a powerful person with a love brain. Sure enough, a race with reproductive cancer was different. Mating was the most important thing in life. Li Wen felt somewhat helpless towards the handsome wooden dummy. He nodded towards Ning Shu and said, "Other than these two things, what else do you want?" "Two is enough." Ning Shu didn't ask for much and felt that she had taken advantage of the situation. However, because of these monsters, she had even lost her own world. Give her two world origins with the attributes of light and darkness. The beautiful wooden puppet man called out to the naked person beside him. "King, the other party didn't give much light and darkness elemental world's origins this time. We can't give her the light and darkness elemental world's origins. See, we don't have it. You still have the cheek to ask for it." The beautiful wooden dummy Ning Shu spread his hands and said. Ning Shu was speechless. Crazy. As long as he thought of the overwhelming number of monsters targeting him, Ning Shu looked at the beautiful wooden dummy with hatred. Perhaps he wanted the monsters to capture her, but he couldn't rule out the possibility that he wanted to kill her. Ning Shu's eyes were blazing as he looked at the beautiful wooden dummy. Ning Shu turned to Li Wen and said, "Brother, don't tell me you're this guy's forbidden mate. Don't mix around with him, come over here." "Bullshit, I'm his forbidden mate." The beautiful wooden dummy scolded loudly. Ning Shu, profound meaning. He remembered that when Li Wen was the emperor, he had concubines and children. Why did he like this type of person now? He probably traveled to many places and saw many things. He opened the door to a new world. King. The subordinates, you don't want the origin of the 5 elements? Li Wen said. Ning Shu shook his head. Then you owe me a favor. Cunning woman. The beautiful wooden dummy dragged Li Wen away. Li Wen and Ning Shu waved their hands. Ning Shu also waved his hands. After thinking for a while, he turned around and returned to the tent. He said to Fragrant Wind, who was sitting on the chair, "General, do you have any extra light and darkness attributes? I want to buy them." "You didn't get them." Fragrant Wind took off his military cap and lifted his bangs that were blocking his eyes. At the same time, he touched some hair wax. The tent was suddenly filled with the fragrance of hair wax. The war was over. It felt like Fragrant Wind was going to wear a flowery shirt again and apply the heavy smell of hair wax. "I'm in contact with the people over there. Will I be convicted?" Ning Shu said. Fragrant Wind touched his hair until it was shiny and smooth. He put on his military cap. "If you can get them back, it's your ability. Those were originally given by us. It's great that you can get them back. However, we can't give them to you privately. Then do you have any extra light and darkness attributes?" Ning Shu asked. "Yes, you can buy them with merit points." Fragrant Wind said. "Okay." Things that could be solved with money were small matters. It felt like Fragrant Wind was especially fiery after he went to the battlefield. The war was over and it seemed to be peaceful. Of course, the battlefield was constantly changing. Who would have the time to talk to you properly? Of course, it didn't eliminate the possibility of using all the resources to negotiate. Now that the negotiations were over, the remaining resources could be bought and sold. Ning Shu and the others were a little eccentric. All of them were crazy. "How much do you want for those two?" Ning Shu asked. 1 million. Fragrant Wind said. Ning Shu, inflation was killing him. It was so expensive. Ning Shu was a little hesitant. His world was already broken to such a state. Could the light and darkness attributes really form another world? Ning Shu checked his account balance. He had no more power of faith. However, he had more than 4 million merit points. He didn't use them much on the battlefield. Buy. Ning Shu decided to buy. If he were to look for it himself, he didn't know how long it would take. As for what Xiaohua had, he didn't have much hope. Ning Shu took out his identity card and swiped it at the table. As soon as he got close to the abyssal prefect, his soul was suffocating. The fragrance assailed his nostrils. There was also a thick bloody smell. This smell was simply terrifying. Ning Shu instinctively held his breath. He swiped the card and quickly distanced himself from fragrant wind. The bloody aura on his body was about to solidify. As soon as he got close, his soul felt like it was being pricked by needles. Fragrant wind looked at his account and then gave Ning Shu a fist-sized seed with a yin-yang diagram on it. It was called a seed because the surface wasn't flat. It was a little bumpy like a walnut shell. Two sides of yin and yang. Seeing this thing, Ning Shu felt that the thing on Xiaohua's body couldn't form the world's origin. It was hard for Xiaohua to carry two stones around every day. Chapter 2307. Ning Shu took the world's origin and left the tent, returning to the place where the law incarnation was stationed. Before he came, there were originally thousands of law incarnations, but now there were only 200 to 300 of them. The team was empty in an instant. Many law cities no longer had city lords. Those who had follow-up missions would slowly comprehend the law and fill in the gaps. It was like leeks. After a while, they would grow again. As long as the root of the leek was still there, more leeks would emerge. Too many people had died. Not only were they dead, but the law imprints were also gone. Ning Shu felt very lucky to be able to snatch a wood-type law. Moreover, it was the wood-type law of water and wood. Ning Shu walked over and said to the man in the Cheongsam, "The war is over." "It's really over?" The man in the Cheongsam raised his eyebrows. "You don't seem to believe it. We've already negotiated." Ning Shu sat down cross-legged and took out the light and darkness world's attributes. He placed it in the peerless martial art. He did not know if the broken world could absorb the light and darkness world's origin. Now that the world's origin had been collected, but the world was broken into such a state. Ning Shu only felt a little melancholy before recovering. After all, his life was saved. There was a chance to repair the world. "Since the war is over, why aren't you retreating?" The man in the Cheongsam held a fan in his hand. He was probably in a hurry to repair the fan. "I guess we'll have to stay here for a while. The Soul Army would probably have to stay here forever. Perhaps the monster insects would come back and continue to fight after taking the item." Ning Shu looked at the peerless martial art. There were still no changes. He guessed that it would not be able to absorb the world's origin for a while. Ning Shu had been paying attention to the world to prevent the world's origin from being devoured by the law of nothingness. Instead, it strengthened the law of nothingness. The black hole is closing. The man in the Cheongsam saw the black hole on the opposite side slowly converge and finally disappear. The passage is closed. Looks like the war is really over. Ning Shu let out a long breath. He had finally survived. However, the other party still had to send millions of insects to fill the Law Sea. With so many corpses thrown in, how polluted would the Law Sea be? Before the new Sea of Law was formed, they had to throw corpses into it. Although the corpses of monsters had rule laws, it was very harmful. There was a high chance that a newly born plane would be deformed or a plane that had collapsed. It was enough to drive the mission enforcers crazy. In addition, the organization had killed a large number of mission enforcers. TSK. Why do I feel like I'm done for? However, the abyssal prefect said that the Sea of Law could hold on for a long time. Maybe when she died, the Sea of Law would still be standing. She didn't expect Li Wen to be on the other side of the black hole. Her life's fate was truly indescribable. She had painstakingly climbed up and became the weakest existence on this battlefield, but Li Wen was already very strong. Li Wen's cultivation was probably very strong. Perhaps they would meet again on the battlefield. "You guys can disband now," the messenger said to the Law Incarnation. Everyone was so excited that their souls were trembling. It was over. They had survived. All of a sudden, many people left the battlefield through the system, not wanting to stay for even a moment longer. Ning Shu also planned to leave, but before he left, he wanted to see Mo Ming. However, there were too many soldiers. Ning Shu looked around slowly, especially when everyone was wearing the same clothes. It was even harder to find him. Ning Shu asked around and finally found Mo Ming in the crowd that was taller than her. Mo Ming was talking to a few soldiers. Ning Shu walked over after he finished talking. Mo Ming. Why are you looking for me? Mo Ming asked. Ning Shu noticed that the merit points on his chest had become 2 bars and said, "Congratulations, you've been promoted again." "Thank you." Then, the atmosphere became a little awkward. Ning Shu said, "The war is over. I have to go back. Thank you very much this time. I wanted to return the merit points to you, but I wasn't strong enough. If you need anything, you can look for me." It was his first time on the battlefield and he was inexperienced. "Oh, okay." Mo Ming nodded. Then, the atmosphere became silent again. Ning Shu was speechless. "Other than fighting, what does your army usually do?" Ning Shu wanted to know. He remembered that they had the right to report. If there was something that could not be handled in the plane, the Soul Army would appear. "We have to manage billions of planes. Once something happens, we have to deal with it immediately. If there is a plane war, it is a war between planes. We have to send people to suppress it. Also, if there is a sudden collapse of a plane that cannot be controlled, we have to send people," Mo Ming said. It was quite tough. It was similar to mission enforcers. Mission enforcers dealt with small incidents, but they dealt with big ones. "Okay, I'll remember this. If you need anything in the future, you can look for me. I'll try my best to help." Ning Shu said and waved goodbye to Mo Ming. After returning to the system space, Ning Shu lay on the sofa and stared blankly at the ceiling. Although the war had ended, Ning Shu could still hear the sounds of killing and wailing in pain. It was as if she was still on the battlefield. The war should be over. Ning Shu felt like she was in a trance. Ding dong. The sound of the chatting system suddenly rang in the quiet system space, startling Ning Shu. The fish in the spirit pool swayed their tails and the water rippled. Ning Shu opened the chatting system. It was a message from the main system. It said that it was a reward for the law embodiment on the battlefield. There was a one-time exemption and no taxes for 10 years. Ning Shu was speechless. If she did not pay taxes for 10 years, she would not be able to pay taxes for 100 years. It had nothing to do with her. A one-time exemption was too little. However, it was better than nothing. It felt like the organization did not give any rewards at all. Not paying taxes for 10 years was just a small amount. As for the one-time exemption, they were considered lucky. Those who died on the battlefield did not even have their lives, let alone rewards. If they wanted to live, they had to be strong. If they were not strong, they would not have the ability to protect themselves. They would not have anything to protect themselves. They would not even have the right to speak. They had to live with dignity, freedom, and the ability to say no. They had to live without even a chance to defend themselves. People of different levels talked about strength, while people of the same level talked about reason. Ning Shu thought about how many law embodiments had died. That meant that there were many law cities without city lords. Then, could she get a share of the tax revenue? She had lost 100 years of tax revenue. She had to have some income. Otherwise, she would be poor in the future. If she encountered a treasure that could repair the world but could not buy it because she did not have the money, that would be painful. Ning Shu quickly sent a message to the Chongsam man and asked about the arrangements for so many law cities. Chapter 2309. Look, this is my second batch of heaven and earth treasures. I've already sold the first batch. The harvest is not bad. I've already sold them. Pai Lupi looked at the heaven and earth treasures and revealed a kind smile like an old farmer. Pai Lupi handed the account book to Ning Shu. Ning Shu flipped through it and looked at Pai Lupi. Not bad. Maybe you're still an old banker. Please don't describe me as an ordinary farmer. Pai Lupi gave Ning Shu a space in the ring. Ning Shu roughly scanned it and found that there were quite a few. Ning Shu kept the ring. You could never have too many spirit stones. To support the world of reincarnation, 2333 still needed to take away 20%. It might not be enough for him, so he had to collect more spirit stones. Ning Shu also gave Pai Lupi some emerald green liquid that was full of vitality. Since Pai Lupi wanted to walk this path, she could get spirit stones. Why not? She didn't need Pai Lupi to be loyal to her. As long as she had enough spirit stones, whatever Pai Lupi did had nothing to do with her. After leaving Pai Lupi's house, Ning Shu went to the spirit stone mine. Walking into the mine, he saw that the golden spirit origin liquid had accumulated to half a basin. He quickly put it away. Ning Shu planned to put away the spirit origin liquid. He didn't want to take it to the main system to purify it. The main system could take away 40% of the spirit origin liquid. It was too damn annoying. Ning Shu felt that he should start learning the purification skill. Poverty leads to change. The current Ning Shu was too poor. Letting the other party take away 40% of the spirit origin liquid, Ning Shu's heart was bleeding. If he sold this 40% of the spirit origin liquid, he would have become a rich and beautiful woman and reached the peak of life. Hee hee. A chuckle came from the corner. Ning Shu, who had just landed on the battlefield, looked at everything with a kind gaze. She looked at the golden earthworm with a kind gaze, which made the golden earthworm's hair stand on end. The exposed fangs retracted, and the earthworm moved back a little. Gulp, hee hee. The golden earthworm squeezed out a trembling sound from its throat. This mine was more or less finished. Let's find another place to dig. There were many mines that had been discovered but could not be mined. If there was no other way, he could just sell the soul stones to the mission enforcers. What? You said that the soul stone is impure. Mission enforcers can send it to the main system to purify it and split it with the main system. As for how much he would get, that would depend on how much he got from the main system. Right now, she had about 3/4 of the soul stones in this mine. The reason why she didn't dig them all out was because she was afraid of damaging the golden soul origin liquid and causing it to dry up. As Ning Shu thought about it, he let out a terrifying laughter that sounded like a nightingale. Golden earthworm, you're sick. Ning Shu looked at the golden earthworm and said, I'm going to look for a new mine. Do you want to come with me? Hee hee. The two-legged monster began to coax him again. Ning Shu knew the location of a few soul stone mines from the jade slip, but he didn't know the specific location. When she was digging this mine, she took many detours. If she had the golden earthworm, she could save time and energy. Hee hee, why should I go with you? We'll split the soul stones we find, Ning Shu said. I can find it myself. There is no soul stone mine in this world that I can't find. I can monopolize the entire soul stone mine. Why should I share it with you? The golden earthworm snorted. Ning Shu was actually speechless by an earthworm. Thinking about it carefully, it seemed to be the case. Ning Shu said, when the resources in the first layer are almost all found, I'll go to the second layer. I wonder what kind of soul stone mines there will be on the second layer. So. The golden earthworm said ambiguously. Do you want to go to the second layer? Ning Shu asked with a smile. No, the second layer is too dangerous. The two-legged monsters on the second layer are definitely more powerful and cruel than the ones on the first layer. The golden earthworm wasn't tempted at all. Ning Shu raised his eyebrows and looked at the earthworm. This guy's wisdom and knowledge were not shallow. He knew quite a lot about humans. He guessed that it had dealt with humans when it was young. You were imprisoned by humans in the past, right? Ning Shu said to the golden earthworm. This kind of monster could find soul stone mines. Wouldn't it be a good helper for humans? Nonsense, how could such a powerful person be imprisoned by a two-legged monster? I can poison these people to death. The golden earthworm was like a cat that had its tail stepped on. Ning Shu looked at the earthworm with a compassionate gaze. Poor thing, why are you so pitiful? The golden earthworm was speechless. Crazy. You really don't want to go together? Ning Shu said to the golden earthworm. Hee, I'm not going. Ning Shu turned around and walked away. As she walked, she waved her hand without looking back. When the time comes, don't blame me for not taking you to the second floor, the third floor, the fourth floor, the fifth floor, the ninth floor. Right, in a sense, the ninth layer could be considered a hell world. The golden earthworm hesitated for a moment. It wanted to follow, but it remembered something and shrank back. Humph, the two-legged monster was cunning and shameless. It wouldn't be fooled. It wanted to trick him into finding the soul stone mine. Humph, Ning Shu left the mine and went to the location of the mine according to the jade slip. Ah, two-legged monster, wait a moment. The golden earthworm turned its body huge and shouted at Ning Shu in the air. Ning Shu floated in front of it. What are you doing? You said you want to take me to the world above. Is that true? The golden earthworm asked Ning Shu. As it spoke, it revealed its sharp fangs. A drop of black venom was floating on the fangs. It looked like it was about to drip down. Why would I lie to you? When I go to the second layer, it's the world. I'll bring you along. Ning Shu said. Okay, I'll go with you to find the soul stone mine. If you dare to lie to me, I'll bite you to death. The golden earthworm was extremely fierce. Ning Shu, what do you have that's worth lying to me? I'm just looking for you to save some time and dig out the soul stone faster. Hee, so Ning Shu brought the earthworm to the soul stone mine. Using a bag to carry the earthworm, the feeling of the earthworm was really indescribable. It was just like a real earthworm. It was fleshy, and the surface was a little slippery. Holding it in his hand, it was hard to describe. Ning Shu suspected that this kind of monster was an earthworm. It could drill into the ground and developed a skill to find the soul stone mine. There was a strange magnetic field around this soul stone mine. As long as people walked into this magnetic field, they would be in a state of madness. No matter how strong they would be affected by this magnetic field. Cultivators would even cause inner demons. Even if their soul body entered, their soul would dissipate. Ning Shu withdrew one of his feet from the magnetic field. He felt very uncomfortable. The situation of this mine was more dangerous than the previous one. The previous one only had dense wind blades. But here, there was an invisible killing magnetic field. Moreover, it was a magnetic field with no pattern. Chapter 23:10. Ning Shu felt that there should be a lot of ores in this mine. Any creature that entered the magnetic field would die, and there should be a lot of souls buried here. Ning Shu threw the bag in his hand into the magnetic field. The earthworm immediately crawled out of the bag and wriggled out of the magnetic field. It cursed at Ning Shu, "Damn two-legged monster, you want to kill me, don't you?" Sure enough, two-legged monsters are so vicious, so cruel, and so inhumane. Ning Shu said, "I thought you could resist this kind of situation." Hee, then I thought you could resist this kind of situation. The earthworm kept muttering, cursing Ning Shu for being treacherous, vicious, and cruel. Ning Shu sized up the mountain range. What exactly formed such a chaotic and terrifying magnetic field? Can we go around this area from underground? Ning Shu asked the earthworm. No. Are you unwilling or unable to? I don't want to, and I also can't. I've been here before, and it's not easy to mine. That's why I chose a safer place. The earthworm shrank into a ball and moved away from Ning Shu. In other words, the ore veins in these dangerous areas were more dangerous than the previous. The ore veins that were not dangerous had already been occupied. It was because of the danger that these ore veins had been preserved until now. Ning Shu still wanted to take this mine. A mine that had existed for a long time must have a lot of soul stones. Two tall mountains stood opposite each other. Ning Shu felt that the chaotic and terrifying magnetic field was definitely because of these two mountains. Would he be able to mine after dealing with these two mountains? If he wanted to deal with these two mountains, the mountains were in the center of the magnetic field. The entire mountain range was enveloped by the chaotic magnetic field. There was not even a single bird in the sky. It was simply a land of death. Ning Shu was a little reluctant to give up such a soul stone mine. The chaotic magnetic field enveloped the entire soul stone mine. If he wanted to sleep late, he would have to endure the magnetic field's disturbance. No one could stay in the chaotic magnetic field for a long time. Moreover, Ning Shu was mining alone. Under the magnetic field, her soul would be disturbed by the magnetic field. What should he do? Ning Shu sat on the ground, propping up his chin as he looked at the distant mountain range. The earthworm propped up its body. It had two golden horns on its head, and it looked at the mountain range like Ning Shu. Let's go somewhere else. The normal ore veins must have been mined out by others, and the soul stones must have been taken away by the big families. We still have to mine this ore vein. Ning Shu propped up his chin and tapped his face with his finger. Then let's go to the second floor. Didn't you say you could go to the second floor? The earthworm said. Not for the time being. The passage was filled with space blades, and there were also situations where space collapsed. If one did not understand the laws of space, they would most likely get lost in the passage and die. Two-legged monsters are just so treacherous and cunning. They are full of lies and shameless. The earthworm immediately exploded. What's the hurry? We still haven't collected enough resources for this floor. I have to find a way to solve the problem of the magnetic field. Ning Shu said. The golden earthworm lay on the ground, not wanting to say a word to the two-legged monster. If it had known this would happen, it would not have followed along. The two-legged monster was truly incorrigible. This race was truly disgusting. If they moved one of the mountains away, the two mountains would not be facing each other, and the magnetic field would not be chaotic. Ning Shu quickly rushed towards one of the mountains. The magnetic field around the mountain became even more chaotic. He could not even touch the mountain, so how could he move it away? He felt as if his soul was being torn apart. Ning Shu hurriedly flew back. The earthworm raised its eyelids and looked at Ning Shu. I already said it was useless. If it could be solved, the two-legged monster would have done it long ago. Ning Shu rubbed his face. If it was a human, his heart would have already exploded into minced meat under the magnetic field. Ning Shu was a bit speechless. He absolutely could not give up on the soul stones, but the magnetic field was a big problem. The range of the magnetic field's radiation was very large. Ning Shu wondered if he should make another huge magnet here. With 3 legs, the magnetic field would be even more chaotic. If he strengthened the chaotic magnetic field, his body would instantly explode as soon as he entered. This sister had roamed the underworld for so many years, but today, she was still stumped by 2 mountains. She was going to fight with this thing. Ning Shu rolled up his sleeves. As long as he solved it, there would be an endless supply of soul stones inside. She would be rich, and she would be able to feed the world. Let's move to another place. The earthworm said weakly. Ning Shu moved his neck and twisted his waist. He used the ruby ring to shoot at the mountain, but the light was distorted by the magnetic field. Ning Shu thought for a moment, and vines stretched out from his palm. The dense vines that were as thick as an arm crawled towards the two mountains. However, the closer the vines got to the mountain, the more they broke into pieces. The magnetic field was too powerful. Ning Shu decided to keep the two mountains. However, if he placed them together, the magnetic field produced by the two mountains would probably destroy everything in the surroundings. The vines slowly turned the color of metal and became even harder. They barely managed to wrap around the two mountains. First, they had to pull the two mountains out from the deep soil. Then, they had to move the two mountains further away. When the mountain range moved, the trees were flattened by the huge mountain range. Ning Shu continuously channeled energy into the vines. It was very difficult to move the two mountains slowly. The vines could not withstand the power of the magnetic field and directly shattered. Then, new vines climbed up and slowly moved the two mountains away. The two magnetic mountains were further and further away from each other. There would be no overlapping magnetic fields. As the two mountains moved, the entire mountain shook a little. It was as if there was an earthquake. It was really fucking tiring. Ning Shu felt that these two mountains must have been moved here on purpose. Otherwise, why would there be two magnetic mountains standing here? Could it be that there was a treasure here? The two mountains moved very slowly. The vines would soon be shaken into powder by the magnetic field and would have to condense into vines again. At the same time, Ning Shu soaked the soil around him with water. This way, when moving the mountains, the ground would be slippery and it would be easier. Just moving the mountains took several days. With such a big movement, Ning Shu crawled up and attracted other pocket players. Thus, he used the water curtain to set up a huge barrier, enveloping the entire mountain. The earthworm yawned and asked, "When will it be done?" "Take your time." In any case, she had a lot of time. "Why don't you do it?" Moving the two mountains away was an easy task. Moreover, there was such a powerful magnetic field. The vines would not be able to hold on for long. If the earthworm did it, it would be injured and its whole body would spurt out golden blood. The golden earthworm was muttering something under its breath. It was probably cursing the two-legged monster again. As the two mountains moved away, the magnetic field's reaction became weaker and weaker. There was also no suffocating death aura. After Ning Shu's difficult foolish old man mountain moving, the two mountains were finally moved further and further away. Now it's your turn. Find the best path and start mining. In the future, we will be a mining team. Chapter 23:11. The golden earthworm kept muttering to itself. Ning Shu really wanted to step on its body. Be more efficient with your work. The golden earthworm burrowed into the ground. It looked meaty, but he didn't expect it to be so good at digging. Ning Shu waited for the golden earthworm to come out. After a while, the earthworm came out and said to Ning Shu, "There aren't many soul stones. There aren't even golden soul stones." Ning Shu was speechless. "That's impossible," Ning Shu said as he pinched his neck. "There really aren't any. Do you think I don't know how many soul stones there are in a mine? Are you doubting my ability?" The golden earthworm said coldly. "I'm not going with you. Anyway, I'm eating these broken things." "Really?" Ning Shu asked. "There really aren't many. If you don't believe me, you can dig." Ning Shu didn't give up. He took a shovel, hammer, and various other tools and started digging. "As expected, you still don't believe me. Do you think I'm a treacherous and disgusting two-legged monster? You're full of lies. I'm too lazy to come. Ning Shu dug with his butt sticking out. Finally, he dug out a soul stone. Ning Shu took the soul stone and shone it with a flashlight. It was a defective low-grade soul stone. This kind of soul stone was similar to a stone in Ning Shu's eyes. It had almost no soul power. However, Ning Shu still put away the soul stone. Then, he dug all the way inside. The quality of the soul stone was still the same. The deeper he went, the better the quality of the soul stone, but the quality wasn't good. Ning Shu felt that the soul stone took up space even if he put it away. "See, I told you. The soul stones here aren't good," the golden earthworm said as it followed behind Ning Shu. Ning Shu continued digging. He spent so much effort to move the two mountains, but the soul stone was actually like this. Ning Shu's heart turned cold. "I'll dig some more. At worst, I'll just hollow out the mountain." Ning Shu did not give up, and continued to knock. The quality of the soul stone made Ning Shu feel very depressed. "Stop digging. I've already said that there are only a few low-quality soul stones in this place," the golden earthworm continued to chatter. It was not angry that Ning Shu questioned its professional ability. Ding! Ning Shu dug up a hard stone wall. The tools in her hands could cut through iron like mud. That was very powerful. Otherwise, mining wouldn't be so easy. But this stone wall, Ning Shu only left some marks on it with her shovel. "Come here and drill," Ning Shu said to the fleshy earthworm. These earthworms could penetrate anything. The earthworm rolled its eyes and began to drill inside. However, halfway through, it retreated. "I can't. This thing is too hard. I can't drill through it. Tsk. Ning Shu shook her head, put down the shovel, took out the ruby ring, attached spiritual force and soul force, and shot a ray of light at the wall. Under this ray of light, a dog hole cracked open in the wall, which could be drilled in. Ning Shu put away the ring and released her spiritual force to scan the situation inside. Ning Shu's heart was really in a mess. There was still a wall inside. She could only take out the ring and shoot a ray through the previous hole. Ning Shu bent down to take a look. There was still a wall inside. This is a scam. Ning Shu expressionlessly shot the ray and finally fell down. Layer by layer, Ning Shu climbed in one hole after another. There must be some treasure inside. The golden earthworm followed behind Ning Shu and climbed out of the last hole. Ning Shu felt that it was dark. She used her spiritual force to scan and found that this was a square secret room. However, the secret chamber was filled with soul stones, all of which were golden in color. Liquid seeped out from the gaps between the soul stones and the soul stones. The liquid gathered together and dripped onto the ground. Golden grass grew on the ground, and a golden flower bloomed on the grass. The flower bud wrapped around a baby that looked like it was curled up. It was only the size of a thumb, but it had all four limbs and closed eyes. "Wow, this is good stuff. Wow, I like it." The golden earthworm suddenly rushed towards the golden grass. Ning Shu stepped on it, and with a puff sound, the golden earthworm vomited blood. "There is a barrier over there. You will die if you get close." Ning Shu frowned. In addition to the golden grass, there was also a skeleton. This skeleton was sitting in the corner. It was estimated that its cultivation was very strong when it was alive. The skeleton did not decay, but it was a dry corpse. Oh! The golden earthworm wanted to curse, but now it retreated. If he guessed correctly, it was set up by a skeleton when it was alive. Then what was this thumb-sized baby? It was golden all over, and it grew from the grass watered by the golden soul source liquid. Ning Shu took out the ruby ring and shot a ray of light at the enchantment. The enchantment dimmed a little after being hit by the ray of light. It also weakened a little. Ning Shu shot another ray, and finally the barrier broke under the corrosion of the light of time. The golden earthworm carefully crawled to the side of the golden grass and breathed in the scent of the flower. Ning Shu went over to take a look. He felt that the baby was really small, as if it was a baby carved out of gold. It was too rare. What do we do now? The golden earthworm asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu asked, you deal with soul stones every day. Do you know that? I don't know. Ning Shu did not know what to do now. After all, the world was big, and there were too many strange things. There were also many ways to give birth to life. Could it be that a baby was about to be born? Kacha, kacha. There was a sound in the secret room. Ning Shu looked around and found that the mummy in the corner had stood up. It stood up, ah. The golden earthworm was so scared that it crawled to Ning Shu's body and shivered. Ning Shu was speechless. Damn, it was so powerful when it was dealing with her. Now it was so scared when it saw a mummy. Ning Shu put the ring on her finger and looked at her hand. She said lightly, you're just pretending to be mysterious. Scram, scram. A hoarse voice came out of the mummy's throat. Ning Shu looked at the mummy protecting the grass and asked, let me guess your purpose. Using the soul source liquid to give birth to a baby and then possessing it. Possession was the most common way to extend one's life in the cultivation world. It was to possess a body with good talent, or if one was unwilling to die, they would possess another body to start their life. Scram. The mummy did not seem to understand Ning Shu's words and kept asking him to scram. This baby looks very powerful. I am also a soul body. I want to possess it too. Ning Shu said. Bitch. The mummy cursed in a hoarse voice. A powerful aura burst out from its body. This aura was like the might of the heavens, pressing down on everyone. Ning Shu did not care about the pressure at all. If it was really so powerful, why would it need to scare people like this? Let me see what kind of ghost you are. Ning Shu raised his hand and the ring on his finger shot a ray of light at the mummy. Double monthly votes. Everyone, vote for me to act cool and fly. Dear friends of Qidian, please vote more/BK. Chapter 23:12. The moment the time light touched the mummy turned into ashes under the corrosion of time, becoming a pile of ashes. Ah, cheap slave! The mummy roared furiously. A powerful soul escaped from the mummy, preventing it from turning into ashes like the mummy. This soul was a middle-aged man. His entire body was filled with a powerful aura. He should have been one of the top experts when he was alive. Cheap slave! The soul scolded Ning Shu. However, he was afraid of the ruby ring on Ning Shu's hand. He floated in the air and looked at Ning Shu and the earthworm on her shoulder. This place is mine. Hurry up and scram, or you'll have to bear the consequences. The soul had the demeanor of an expert, as if Ning Shu was an ant. As long as he left, he would not hurt her. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. If you want to fight, then let's fight. What's the point of acting? No amount of talking would be as practical as a fight. What is this? Why have I never seen it before? Ning Shu looked at the finger-sized baby wrapped in the flower bud. The world was big, and there were many rare things. He knew that trees could give birth to life, but he did not expect that even grass could give birth to life. Scram! The middle-aged man had no intention of explaining. He roared, causing sand and stones to fly. It was a terrifying sight. Old man, you're hiding here. Don't tell me you're waiting for the child to mature. You've taken over a natural spiritual object. Aren't you afraid that you don't have the fortune? Ning Shu said with disdain. Speaking of which, the souls of 9 Palace Mountain could also cultivate. However, humans always had a strange feeling about their bodies. Their bodies were weak and easily damaged, but humans could not abandon their bodies. Even if they wanted to cultivate, they had to cultivate with their bodies. The body was their root. Even if this soul cultivated as a soul, it was still a very powerful existence. Now, it was squatting here, waiting for the flower to mature. Cheap slave, you dare to snatch this old man's things and spout nonsense. This old man will destroy your soul first. The middle-aged man's body exploded with a cloud of black mist. In the blink of an eye, it was in front of Ning Shu. Ning Shu pointed his finger and a water enchantment enveloped the cloud of black mist. The black mist crashed around in the enchantment, but it could not get out. Let me out. The middle-aged man smashed the barrier again and again, but it was like he was smashing into water. Even if he smashed a hole, the hole was gone in the next second. Ning Shu squatted by the grass and reached out to touch the baby in the bud. It was really small. This baby was only the size of Ning Shu's finger. With this touch, the baby actually turned over and closed its eyes to continue sleeping. It's alive. The golden earthworm was so scared that its body curled up like a caterpillar. Ning Shu, WTF. Terrifying. Ning Shu asked the cultivator inside the barrier, what is this? I don't know. Oh. Ning Shu filled the barrier with heavy water. Even souls could feel their bodies sinking in the heavy water. It was as if their bodies were being torn apart. This was not a good feeling. The middle-aged man first gritted his teeth and endured it. Then, he opened his mouth and wailed. Ning Shu ignored him. He reached out to poke the baby in the bud. The baby rubbed its eyes with its small hands and murmured like a baby. Finally, it opened its eyes. It was a pair of golden eyes. They looked around without focus. I'm scared. The golden earthworm quickly slid down from Ning Shu's body, not daring to look. Earlier, it was as fierce as a mountain king. Why was it like this now? What are you afraid of? Aren't you poisonous? You can even contaminate souls and soulstone mines, Ning Shu said. The baby opened its eyes for a moment before closing them again. Then, it yawned and went back to sleep. A life born from a soulstone mine. Its entire body was formed from the essence of souls. Ning Shu stroked his chin and pondered. The golden earthworm was both drooling and fearful of this baby. Ning Shu opened the enchantment. The cultivator in the enchantment was in a sorry state. He was incomparably angry. He turned into a black mist and rushed towards the baby in the bud. If not for these people suddenly barging in, he would not have tried to seize this body before it matured. He had waited here for countless days. As long as he could obtain this body, his cultivation would definitely advance by leaps and bounds. He would be able to enter the 2nd level of the world, the 9th level of the world, and then out of this trial. In the cultivation world, he would be an unparalleled expert. He had waited for the flower to bear fruit. He had waited until he was haggard. He only needed to wait for a few more decades, but a lowly servant barged in. He had wrapped this secret room in layers. He had used the toughest stone in the world. He did not expect it to be broken through like this. Ning Shu raised his hand. A ray of light shot out from the ring into the black mist. The black mist dissipated at a speed visible to the naked eye. It became dimmer and dimmer. Nothing could escape the ravages of time. Even the sea of laws that gave birth to billions of planes would walk towards destruction. The man's soul became incomparably dim and thin. It was as if the wind could blow him away. When the middle-aged cultivator saw the ring on Ning Shu's finger, his face revealed a horrified expression. His soul had absorbed the soul force in this mine and was already very strong. He did not expect that under this ring, he would feel his strength and life force rapidly depleting. Lowly servant, if you want to snatch something, you have to see if you have the ability. The middle-aged cultivator stretched out his hand. The pocket-sized baby that was sleeping in the bud floated towards him. It even opened its mouth to eat the baby. Don't let him eat it. Let me eat it. The earthworm shouted anxiously at Ning Shu. Why don't you rush up and spray poison on his face? Ning Shu could not bear to see the earthworm look at her. She was so arrogant. She became a coward the moment she stepped out of the door. The earthworm seemed to have just remembered that it had a soul-corroding poison. Like an arrow, it rushed in front of the cultivator in a blink of an eye. It opened its mouth and bit the cultivator's soul. Ah! The cultivator let out an unbearable howl. Immediately after, his soul started to change color. It was multicolored. White turned black, black turned into a flower. In short, it was called poison. Ning Shu snatched the pocket-sized baby. The baby was in her palm, curled up into a ball and sleeping. Moreover, the baby's body temperature was very high. Lying in her palm, she felt as if her soul was burning. Ning Shu hurriedly placed it into the bud and looked at her palm. It was bright red and the burning sensation didn't subside for a while. The soul that was bitten by the golden earthworm became weaker and weaker. It sat in the corner and howled. It hugged its head. Its mind started to become chaotic. Its eyes were blank and lifeless. This poison was probably corroding a person's mind and consciousness. Ning Shu was a little afraid of the golden earthworm. If this thing bit her body when she was not paying attention, her soul would be contaminated. She was afraid that this earthworm had eaten too many soul stones and soul source liquid. Chapter 23:13. The soul stone and soul origin were originally not pure. This poison should be the impurities and toxins in the soul stone. The earthworm removed them and turned them into venom in its body. It turned into a fool after being bitten. Ning Shu looked at the golden earthworm with an unfathomable gaze. Hee, now you know how powerful I am. If you dare to be disrespectful to me in the future, I will bite you to death, the golden earthworm said proudly. Can I eat this thing? Eat it if you can, Ning Shu said. I'm a little scared. It feels a little familiar. Ning Shu rolled his eyes. Hee. This is obviously a living thing, and it grew from soul origin. If you are not afraid of being weak, you can eat it, Ning Shu said. It was only the size of a thumb now. He did not know if it would grow bigger in the future. Then I'll pass. I feel a little forced. The golden earthworm shook its head. While Ning Shu was talking to the golden earthworm, the soul had been corroded into a wandering soul that had no consciousness. It floated around and didn't know where to go. Even if it bumped into a wall, it didn't know how to turn around. It just kept bumping into the wall and kept bumping into it. Ning Shu looked at the soul that had become like this and touched his chin. He looked at the wandering soul and then at the earthworm. Finally, he said, give me some of your poison. This kind of thing was simply a killing machine for souls. Mission enforcers and the soul army were all souls. If something happened that he could not solve in the future, he could just pour the poison over. It was also a way to protect himself. No, I want to keep it to protect myself. If you dare to have any thoughts about me, I will bite you to death. The earthworm bared its teeth, revealing its sharp fangs. Black venom floated on the fangs. I will never believe the words of two-legged monsters. Two-legged monsters are the most vicious, cruel, and inhumane monsters in the world. The earthworm directly rejected Ning Shu. Ning Shu spread his hands. If the earthworm did not want to give it to him, then so be it. To be honest, he was afraid that the venom would drip on his body. Ning Shu didn't know what to do with the baby in the bud. Moreover, it was clearly still developing and hadn't fully grown. At the very least, it didn't have any distinguishing features, so he didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. There were a lot of golden soul stones here, and they had formed a low-lying pool of soul origin liquid. Ning Shu took out a basin and collected the accumulated soul origin liquid. This stalk of grass didn't lack the soul origin liquid. Drops of golden liquid dripped onto this stalk of grass. The earthworm also crawled to the side of the low-lying area and directly gulped down the soul origin fluid, causing its body to grow fatter. Ning Shu was speechless. Looking at it made his heart ache. His heart ached. Think about it. These monsters eat high-grade stuff. They eat planes and drink soul origin elixir. They are living the life of a tycoon. Thinking about how she had tightened her belt and had no income for 100 years, Ning Shu felt that she was really too pitiful. She had sinned. That's enough. How much do you want? Then don't pretend. You're only allowed to pretend. No one else is allowed to eat. Two-legged monsters are greedy, selfish, and vicious. Ning Shu was too lazy to quarrel with it. Now he was worried about how to deal with this baby. Ning Shu said to the earthworm, "Why don't you raise it and guard it here? It's obviously not mature yet." "I don't want it." The earthworm refused without even thinking about it. "It's too dangerous here. The two mountains have been moved away. There is no protective barrier at all. When someone comes, there will be demon beasts and two-legged monsters. You actually want to kill me? Ah, why are you so smart?" Ning Shu couldn't help but say. Ning Shu thought that the two magnetic mountains had indeed been moved away. This was a soul stone mine. When the time came, someone would come to mine. "Move this away." "Move it to the previous mine," Ning Shu said. "Barely." The earthworm nodded in agreement. Ning Shu took out a shovel and prepared to dig up the grass and take it to the soul stone mine where the earthworm was. There was also golden soul origin liquid there. "I can't pry it open." Ning Shu took the shovel and dug the soil, but the golden ground couldn't be dug at all. "You loosen the soil." The earthworm wriggled its body, then drilled out from the other side and began to loosen the soil repeatedly. In the end, he almost died of exhaustion. Finally, the soil around the plant was loosened. Ning Shu slowly pried the plant up and made a flower pot. He put it in the flower pot, then held the soil that was dyed golden by the soul origin liquid. He scooped up some soul origin liquid and watered it. He hoped that this flowering grass wouldn't wither. The pocket-sized baby in the bud was still sleeping soundly, as if it was in its mother's amniotic fluid, peaceful and peaceful. After dealing with the plant, Ning Shu immediately collected all the soul origin liquid in the low-lying area. He even dug up the golden soil. The soil soaked in the soul origin liquid was many times better than the poor-quality soul stones outside. After filling it with the soul origin liquid and scraping a layer of the soil, Ning Shu immediately began to dig up the golden soul stones above his head. Although it was a bit difficult, the harvest was still quite good. Ning Shu decided to take out a part of the soul stones and the golden soul stones to sell and make more money for himself. After all, he didn't have any income for more than 100 years. Ning Shu collected all the essence of the entire mine. As for the impurities in the soul stones outside, Ning Shu didn't plan to take them. If he had the time, it would be better to mine the mines in other dangerous areas. He didn't know what kind of harvest there would be. It was simply awesome. As for the soul that had lost its consciousness, it was wandering around in the secret chamber. The soul was very vague, and even its facial features were somewhat unclear. Such a soul would sooner or later be absorbed by the heavens and earth and become a part of the soul stones. "Let's go." Ning Shu returned from a rewarding journey. Holding the flower pot, he crawled out of the mine. After coming out of the mine, Ning Shu clearly felt some powerful auras coming in his direction. As time passed, these auras became stronger and stronger, getting closer and closer. Moreover, they were coming from all directions. Ning Shu hurriedly slipped away. On the way, he wrapped his body with an enchantment to avoid leaving behind any aura or smell. Some powerful cultivators would be able to deduce what happened at that time. Ning Shu thought for a moment and pointed his finger. A stream of water surged into the mine, washing away the traces left in the mine. After doing this, Ning Shu held the flower pot and quickly left with the earthworm. When he returned to the previous mine, Ning Shu let out a long breath. This kind of sneaky feeling, where people didn't know that he had things in his hands, felt very good. Even if those people found him, they wouldn't be able to find him and vomit blood. This was the safest way. He didn't want to show off his wealth, especially if he had treasures in his hands. He had to be more simple and low-key. Ning Shu took out a shovel and dug a hole under the drop of soul origin liquid. He then planted the grass. There was also soul origin here, so this plant should be able to grow. Chapter 23:14. After digging a hole, he carefully moved the grass from the pot into the hole and buried it. He then used a shovel to cover the surrounding soil. Why do we have to raise it? The earthworm didn't understand. We might as well eat it. It's already grown like this. Why don't we wait for a while and see what it looks like and what use it has? If we eat it now, there'll be nothing left. I've never seen anything like this before. What's wrong with waiting for a while? Ning Shu said. Was it because the grass could give birth to life? Or was it because the grass had been watered by the soul origin? It was a pity that the soul didn't have any consciousness. Otherwise, he could have asked him about it. But even if he did, he wouldn't have said anything. You'll have to take care of it in the future. Don't eat it. If I'm not wrong, your body will definitely be burned to ashes if you eat it. Ning Shu threatened the earthworm. Don't lie to me. I don't believe in two-legged monsters. The earthworm didn't give him any face. Ning Shu was speechless. This fellow had probably been hurt badly in the past. If it didn't believe him, then so be it. Ning Shu didn't believe that this thing couldn't protect itself. This time, he had obtained another soul stone mine. Most importantly, he had obtained a lot of soul origin fluid and golden soul stones. Only soul stones with such high purity were worth the risk. Ning Shu had to think of a way to learn the purification skill. Every time he brought it to the main system to purify, Ning Shu was no longer satisfied with the way things were divided. He had put in the most, but in the end, he had become the person who took the least. If he had the ability to purify, he wouldn't be controlled by others. If it was just an ordinary soul stone, it wouldn't matter. But when he thought about the soul origin fluid, his heart ached. Ning Shu looked at the earthworm. It was quite capable to be able to remove the impurities in soul stones and soul origin fluid. Ning Shu asked, "How do you purify soul origin fluid?" "What purification? I don't know what you're talking about." The earthworm directly said. Ning Shu was speechless. Alright, it was better not to be envious of this kind of talent. Just like humans, the body would absorb the nutrients from the food it ate, and the unwanted waste would be expelled from the body. The law of nothingness was the best at purifying. It could purify anything until there was nothing left. Ning Shu saw that it was about time and wanted to continue looking for the next dangerous soul stone mine. However, he still had to return to the system space and talk about business. In any case, he had some low-quality ones that he could use to do business. There was also the golden soul stone. A person's soul power could be strengthened, but the source of the soul was fixed. If one's soul was incomplete and could reincarnate, they could only be a worm that lived day and night. Those who asked for the counterattack had offered up their own spiritual strength. Their spiritual origin was still preserved, but without spiritual strength, their souls would become very weak. Who knew what would happen on the path of reincarnation? In particular, the pool of past life would strip away a portion of one's soul power. At that time, one's soul would be weakened. Ning Shu said, I'm leaving. Guard it well and don't eat it. You obviously look weak and can't take the nourishment. Ah, are you going to the second level? You said you would take me with you, the golden earthworm with horns hurriedly asked Ning Shu. I can't go for the time being. When I'm going, I'll naturally take you with me. Ning Shu looked at the pocket-sized doll in the bud. He was afraid that with this doll, he would not be able to go to the second level for sure. Besides, the law of space was not so easy to comprehend. He made it sound as if he could comprehend the law of space immediately. Speaking of which, so many law incarnations had died, and now many law imprints were without owners. If he could comprehend them in this world, he might be able to obtain 1 or 2 more law imprints. Ning Shu spat at himself. He made it sound as if the law was very easy to comprehend. Now, she couldn't even cross the threshold of the restaurant when she went to the space city, let alone the second level. Don't run around in fear. It'll be interesting if you get caught. Guard this thing well. If someone else gets it, our efforts will be in vain. Ning Shu thought about it and set up a barrier for the grass. Since it was a plant, it must need life energy. Ning Shu condensed an emerald green liquid the size of a fingernail. He didn't dare to condense too much for fear of any conflicts. The emerald green liquid merged into the soil. Ning Shu stared at the grass, but there was no change. He dripped a few more drops, but there was still no change. It seemed that this plant did not need life energy, so Ning Shu was too lazy to water it. He glanced at the thumb baby sleeping peacefully in the bud. This guy couldn't be Thumbelina, right? Ning Shu returned to the system space and took out a pile of mid-quality soul stones, mixed with some golden soul stones, and sent it to the main system. 2333, send it over, Ning Shu said to 2333. But the soul stones in the system space didn't move. Ning Shu shouted again, 2333, you can send the soul stones over now. Oh, what did you say? 2333 seemed to have just reacted and asked Ning Shu. Ning Shu repeated again, send these soul stones to the main system for purification. Okay. The soul stones in the system space were gone, and 2333 didn't say anything. It was silent. Ning Shu felt that 2333 was a little distracted. If it was before, he would have asked her to take out better quality soul stones or even soul elixir. But now, she was so quiet. Was there something on her mind? Ning Shu asked 2333 out of love, is there something wrong? 2333 didn't say anything. Maybe she was in a daze again and didn't understand what she said at all. Ning Shu gave up on talking to 2333. Since she didn't respond, there was no way to talk. It was awkward to talk, so it was better not to talk. They didn't walk the path of understanding. Ning Shu fed some pure soul energy to the world of reincarnation and stroked the black hole. Please don't let anything go wrong. Ning Shu collected some soul elixir and went to Water City, then went straight to the auction house. After paying the entrance fee, he went to the auction house again. Ning Shu felt that things were still the same, but people had changed. The effects of the war still hadn't subsided. Ning Shu felt that he would need to rest for a long time before he could do quests again. He wanted to take advantage of this time to mine more ores, cultivate the law of space, and enter the second layer of Nine Palace Mountain to broaden his horizons. As for the ninth layer, Ning Shu felt that if he couldn't enter any world as easily as an abyssal prefect, it would be best if he didn't go to the ninth layer. What if he couldn't come out? Ning Shu felt that he loved to think too much. He couldn't even go to the second layer, so he was worried about the ninth layer. Chapter 23:15. Ning Shu directly asked the staff of the auction house if Si Tian was there. The staff went to call Si Tian. Si Tian, dressed in long sleeves, walked over leisurely with his hands crossed. Si Tian was a person who knew how to use money and power, and his methods were also very good. City Lord, what do you want to buy? Do you need me to recommend something? Si Tian asked politely. Ning Shu always felt that Si Tian saw that she was stupid and had a lot of money, so he always recommended flashy things to her. They looked very awesome, but in reality, they were rarely used or even uncontrollable. I'm not here to buy something, I'm here to sell something, Ning Shu said. Si Tian raised his eyebrows and found a private room. He sat down and said to Ning Shu, City Lord, what do you want to sell? Ning Shu took out a bottle of soul origin fluid and said, this is soul origin fluid. His Excellency picked up the bottle and opened the cap. It seems that there are still some impurities. Businessmen were like this. Ning Shu said, even a trace of soul origin fluid is very precious. How much do you think this bottle is worth? He remembered that Si Tian's gambling house used to gamble on soul origin fluid. Si Tian smiled. It is quite precious, but if this is pure, it will definitely be worth several times more. Do you have any pure ones? No, you can let the buyer take it to the main system to purify it. Ning Shu said, even a trace of soul origin fluid is precious. City Lord, do you want to buy it to Si Tian or auction it? Si Tian asked. Ning Shu thought about it. If he sold it to Si Tian, this guy would definitely try his best to lower the price. He might as well auction it. The highest bidder would get it, and the auction house would take a commission. They also hoped to raise the price so that they could take more commission. Auction it. Okay. The matter of soul origin fluid was settled. Ning Shu asked Si Tian, are there any treasures that can repair the world? Repair the world? Si Tian asked. There are very few such things. There shouldn't be any in the inventory. It is difficult to repair the world to its original state. Oh, is there anything that can repair it? Ning Shu asked. The most direct and fastest way is to find the sea of law of the plane that gave birth to it and throw it in there. Perhaps it can be repaired, said Si Tian. Ning Shu then recalled that he had once allowed a shattered space to return to the Sea of Laws, but the Sea of Laws, Ning Shu did not think of this method, because he subconsciously felt that the Sea of Laws had already been contaminated, and the world was already in such a dilapidated state, and then placed in the contaminated Sea of Laws. It would probably be destroyed even faster. Especially now, there should be countless insect bodies floating on the Sea of Law. Ning Shu didn't want to pollute his world. There was no need to even think about this method. Originally, the world's body had been torn apart and was covered in wounds. Now that it was smeared with all sorts of dirty things, it would die even faster. Other than this? Ning Shu asked, and not just anyone could go to the Sea of Law. I really don't know about that. No one has ever come to me to buy such things, and I don't have any goods either. Very few people repair broken worlds, Si Tian said. Ning Shu was speechless. So he still had to find a professional to ask. Speaking of professionals, he still had to find the silver-haired man. Where do you guys get all these things from? Ning Shu was curious. All sorts of props, weapons, and strange things. City Lord, are you planning to do business? Si Tian avoided the main point and asked lightly. No, I'm just curious. Thinking about the existence of the military supply department, these people who made all sorts of props and weapons, could it be another department of the organization? There are specialized supply channels, and specialized technical personnel to do these things. Oh, that's really the case. How are the prices now? It's already falling, and will slowly return to normal. Ning Shu was speechless. Fuck, when she bought things, the prices were 3 or 4 times higher. Now that she was selling things, the prices were back to normal. Maybe it was because the war was over, and there was no shortage of supplies, and it was going to return to normal. Ning Shu felt that he would never be able to catch up to the good timing. He had a feeling that even eating dung could not catch up to the heat. It was very hopeless. Ning Shu said to Si Tian weakly, "Try to sell it at a high price. In order to get this, I suffered a lot and almost lost my life. My soul was about to scatter." Si Tian's expression was calm. "I'll try my best. City Lord, do you need any props?" "No need." Ning Shu firmly refused. He felt that Si Tian was going to start promoting his performance again. After exiting the auction house, Ning Shu wandered around the City of Water and repaired the City of Water. Life without taxes was hopeless. She had to work for free for 100 years. She did not know if she could live to 100 years old. Ning Shu walked to the door of the consultation room. When he walked to the door, he smelled the fragrance of agarwood. The silver-haired man had opened for business. Ning Shu walked into the room and sat down, waiting for the silver-haired man to appear. Using money to buy knowledge was quite worth it. The silver-haired man came out of the room with a book in his hand. Ning Shu did not dare to look down on the book in his hand anymore. When the silver-haired man saw Ning Shu, his expression was calm. He sat down and asked, "What do you want to ask?" Ning Shu glanced at the book on the table. He remembered that a few of the silver-haired man's worlds seemed to have been destroyed. The paper was torn in half. "I want to ask, is there anything that can repair worlds?" Ning Shu went straight to the point. The man in the Cheongsam frowned and said, "Yes, there are fruits of the world tree, soul origin, and nomological sea stones." Ning Shu smiled. There were soul origin, and there seemed to be a few nomological sea stones. She threw them into the fish pond. "Is the world tree a world tree with one leaf? This kind of tree can bloom and bear fruit. The difficulty is the same as an iron tree blooming. After all, with so many leaves, it's very difficult to give these worlds energy. There's no extra energy to bloom and bear fruit." The silver-haired man answered whatever he asked. "Then are there many nomological sea stones born in the Sea of Law?" Ning Shu asked. The silver-haired man glanced at Ning Shu, and finally said, "The Sea of Law has stopped producing nomological sea stones a long, long time ago." That's right, now that the Sea of Law had stopped producing rules, it was another heavy topic. If Ning Shu did not have the 9-Palace Mountain, these three things would be very difficult for her. She was not familiar with the person who had the world tree's fruit. If she wanted to ask for a fruit, no one would pay attention to her, and there would definitely not be any on the market. Even a trace of soul origin was extremely precious. To repair a world, one had to pour buckets of it inside. As for nomological sea stones, her world was filled with cracks, so a few nomological sea stones were probably useless. Ning Shu looked at the silver-haired man's world. He did not know if the silver-haired man's broken world had been repaired. However, he did not ask about private matters. Ning Shu asked again, "Then does the soul origin need to be pure, or an ordinary soul origin?" Chapter 23:16. If he needed pure soul energy, he would have to send it to the main system for purification. Ning Shu was reluctant to do that. The silver-haired man asked, "What do you think?" "I think it's normal," Ning Shu said. The silver-haired man said, "As long as you're happy." Alright, he really needed pure soul energy. From a personal point of view, Ning Shu still didn't want his world to be polluted. The main thing was that it was too painful to send the soul energy to the main system for purification. Then, he would use the golden soul stone to purify it. There was a lot of soul energy in the golden soul stone. He would have to take out the precious golden soul stone to purify it. Since he was already here, Ning Shu planned to ask a few more questions. "Then do you know of any way to purify soul energy?" "No. The silver-haired man said directly. Is there really no way? Is there any technique or item that can purify it? If there was no way, how could the main system purify it? There is a way, but it's in the hands of the main system. Also, the mission enforcers don't have the right to know about it. If anyone knows, the mission enforcers will kill people to collect souls and purify them. The silver-haired man said. Ning Shu was speechless. He was speechless. It seemed that the silver-haired man didn't say everything. The concerns that the silver-haired man said were not non-existent. If he wanted to kill people to absorb souls, the price would be very high. Ning Shu sighed and took a deep breath of the agarwood. Although he was a little disappointed, it was within his expectations. However, getting a way to repair the world was the biggest gain. Damn, all of them ate high-end food. He didn't know how much soul energy it would take to repair the world. With such a high price, if Ning Shu didn't have 9 Palace Mountain, he would have no choice but to give up this world. How much? Ning Shu took out his identity card and asked 200,000 merit points. The silver-haired man said. Ning Shu silently swiped the card. He was too lazy to bargain. Who asked her to walk into this consultation room? He took a deep breath of the agarwood before walking out of the consultation room. After getting the solution, Ning Shu quickly returned to the system space and took out a lot of golden soul stones. He asked 2333 to send them to the main system to purify so that the world could be repaired. 2333. Ning Shu looked at the soul stone in the system space. Didn't he send a soul stone away? Why was it still here? What's up? Are you going to do a quest? A system quest? 2333 asked. Ning Shu said, no, I want you to send these soul stones to the main system for purification. Oh. Also, I agreed to use 20% of my soul force, not 20% of my soul origin. Ning Shu said. All of her soul origin was going to be used to repair the world. Oh, that's not right. Isn't it 20%? 2333 snapped back to reality. Back then, I promised you 20% of my soul power, not 20% of my soul essence, Ning Shu said. I'm too lazy to argue with you. Let's leave it at that. 2333 went silent after that. Ning Shu was a little surprised. Why was 2333 so dispirited? Ning Shu was really confused. He thought about it and asked 2333, do you know Jingqing? Jingqing? Who? I don't know him. 2333 said. Ning Shu wanted to scratch his head. He thought this guy was really crazy. He didn't know what these people were talking about. Ning Shu was too lazy to care. The truth would come out one day. As for who Jingqing was, it had nothing to do with her. Ning Shu was going to learn the law of space. After that, he would go mining. There were a few soul stone mines like this that couldn't be mined. He didn't know what other surprises there were in the other danger zones. Even if there weren't any surprises, the quality of the soul stones in these danger zones must be very good. When he arrived at the space city, Ning Shu felt like he had walked into a kaleidoscope. He was dazzled and didn't know where to go. Ning Shu tried to use her hand to split space, but the result was that her hand was split open and she ended up in another unknown space. Every time he entered the space city, Ning Shu felt like he was a headless fly. Ning Shu felt that the taxes in the space city must be very little. People like him couldn't even touch the door of a shop. What could he buy if he couldn't even go in? It was quite embarrassing. Ning Shu wondered if it was because his sense of direction was a little bad that it took him so much effort to learn the law of space. However, if he didn't learn the law of space, when he entered the second floor, he would be crushed by the space blades, space collapses, space storms, and all kinds of other attacks. Ning Shu sat down and raised his chin to look at the space city. After looking at it for a long time, his eyes became blurry. He was clearly going to a shop, but he couldn't walk over. Even if he walked over, he ended up in another shop. Well, the business in the space city definitely wasn't that good. With such a strict entrance test, Ning Shu didn't know if he could pass it. Ning Shu took out the notebook he bought at the auction house. He flipped it over and over, but he couldn't see anything. He looked up, down, left, and right. He was completely at a loss. It couldn't be a scam, right? Sure enough, he still couldn't understand the realm of art. It was as if time and space didn't exist at all. It was an ideology formed when people understood or recognized things. No one could touch time. Ning Shu touched the space city's wall. As he walked, he thought about how to shop on the streets of the space city. From the big universe to the small particles, there was a world in a flower, and a world in a grain of sand. The size of the outside didn't affect the size of the space inside. For example, his peerless martial art was only the size of a book, but the space inside was very large. So, how should he comprehend it? Ning Shu fanned himself with the notebook and leaned against the wall. It was so damn tiring. Every time he comprehended the law of space, Ning Shu felt like a fool. He didn't know how the Chongsam man comprehended the law of time. However, he still had to continue comprehending. Ning Shu always felt that what he had in his hands was probably a strategy for clearing a high-level dungeon. What he needed now was a strategy for the novice village. It was too high-level, and he couldn't understand it at all. The resources of the Nine Palace Mountain supported Ning Shu's comprehension, but he didn't gain anything. There was also no sudden inspiration. It was really frustrating. Perhaps he would comprehend it if he had a flash of inspiration. Ning Shu walked and walked, from one space to another. He went back and forth, and then he got lost. He didn't know how many empty spaces there were in this city. It was so tiring that he cried. He even bragged that he would bring the golden earthworm to the second floor. In the end, he failed to comprehend the law of space. It was really depressing. If he continued walking, Ning Shu felt that he would get lost in space. The lack of progress made him very irritated. He couldn't find the trick and could only do useless work. It was a very bad feeling. Chapter 23:17. Ning Shu shuttled back and forth between countless spaces. She was very annoyed. In the end, she released her vines and pierced through the space, creating a hole in it. This space was too fragile. Ning Shu crawled out of the hole and found a huge foot that looked like a person stepping on her head. She quickly shrank her head and retreated back into the space. After a while, Ning Shu stuck her head out and found that she was in a huge world. The people here were very, very big. One foot could crush her to death. She was as small as a grain of sand. Everything around her was huge. Ning Shu was confused. How did she become so small? Ning Shu crawled out of the space. Her body became bigger and bigger. She was the same size as the people around her. The huge things around her gradually became smaller. The mission enforcers who came and went saw Ning Shu suddenly appear. They didn't look surprised at all. It was very normal. Although she had violently opened the space, Ning Shu was glad that she didn't need to travel through the endless space one after another. It was simply too tiring. Although it was his first time in the space city, he felt very familiar. The layout of all the cities was the same. Except for the different laws, everything else was the same. A design map designed so many cities. Finally, he was out. Ning Shu felt that he should celebrate. He quickly went to the restaurant and ordered a table of desserts. It was sweet in his mouth. Only then did he feel that he was really out of the space. After eating desserts, he decided to test if he would have to go through so many spaces like kaleidoscopes the next time he entered the city. Ning Shu returned to the system space and asked 2333 to send him to the space city. However, 2333 was a little out of it. Basically, when Ning Shu said something, 2333 had to repeat it twice before it would react. It was like a toad, jumping only when poked. Hahaha, is this a young man in love? Back in the space city, Ning Shu appeared in one space after another. If he wasn't careful, he would get lost in the space. Ning Shu was speechless. The space city was definitely the best place to play. Ning Shu directly broke the space from the top and drilled out of the hole. This time, he drilled out from a different place. Could it be that every time he wanted to enter the space city, he had to first break the space before he could enter? And the positions are different? Ning Shu experimented over and over again, testing every time he entered a lost city. After going back and forth like that, 2333 was about to explode. It's been dozens of times. Did you learn anything? I didn't realize anything, Ning Shu said directly. Instead, I became even more confused. 2333 didn't say anything. The room fell into a strange silence and awkwardness. Ning Shu asked, 2333, why do I feel like you're not yourself lately? Tell me what's bothering you. Please don't disturb me. That's the biggest help you can give me. Thank you. Ning Shu was speechless. It was weird. Ning Shu experimented over and over again countless times. In the end, Ning Shu actually figured out where he would go if he opened a hole in the space. For example, if Ning Shu wanted to go to the auction house, he would open a hole in a specific place and crawl out to the auction house. As for the relationship between them, Ning Shu didn't quite understand. Perhaps these two space nodes were on the same line. Although the harvest wasn't very big, at least he could buy things when he entered the space city in the future. He wouldn't have to wander around the kaleidoscope-like space and not be able to find his way. After so many experiments, Ning Shu was mentally exhausted. After returning to the system space to rest for a while, he fished out 5 black irregular law sea stones from the fish pond. As a reward for the intermediate trial, Ning Shu wiped off the wet water on the stones. Then, he took the Peerless Martial Arts book and merged the 5 stones into the Peerless Martial Arts book. Ning Shu looked at the Peerless Martial Arts book over and over again. He felt that the 5 law sea stones were like a drop of water falling into the sea. There wasn't a single drop of water splashing. It was useless. Maybe it was useful, but the surface was densely packed with cracks. Even if 1 or 2 were missing, it wouldn't be obvious. When the main system sent the Soul Origin back, he would use the Soul Origin to repair it. Ning Shu opened the black hole and walked into the world of Samsara. He entered the 9 Palace Mountain to mine. Treasure hunting was the happiest thing. How is it? Ning Shu asked the golden earthworm lying next to the plant. Why are you back? The golden earthworm didn't want to see Ning Shu. Actually, I've been gone for a long time. She had done a lot of things, but the flow of time here was different. Ning Shu looked at the pocket-sized baby in the bud. It was still sleeping. Its eyes were tightly closed, and its eyelashes covered its eyelids. After I left, it has been sleeping. It hasn't woken up? Ning Shu asked. Has it woken up? The earthworm arched its body like a caterpillar, full of aggression. Ning Shu, what cat disease? It hasn't woken up. I'm just asking. Why are you so agitated? The earthworm heaved a sigh of relief. I'm just afraid that it will see your appearance and imitate your appearance. How pitiful would that be? Ning Shu, if it imitates your appearance, its life will be even more pitiful. Ning Shu looked at it with disdain. Then he said, what do you mean by imitating human appearance? The golden earthworm looked at the baby in the bud with lingering eyes and said, I remember the old patriarch said that there is a kind of golden thread grass that grows in the soul stone mine. After absorbing the essence of the soul stone mine, it can give birth to a different kind of life. But this is just a legend. It was all bullshit. Ning Shu said, let's go find other mines together. I'm not going. I want to guard the golden thread grass. The golden earthworm said, I hope that when it opens its eyes, it will see me and remember my appearance. It has already grown 4 limbs and looks like a human. If it wants to grow like you, it will have to be reborn. Ning Shu didn't feel much about this baby. He was thinking about how much soul origin it would absorb to give birth to such a life. The world's heavenly Tao allowed such a life to be born. Then I'll become a 2-legged monster, the golden earthworm said. Ning Shu, finding the soul stone mine is the right thing to do. Maybe the soul stone mine we find will have this kind of golden thread grass. Ning Shu said. Impossible. If one is born, there won't be a second one. Otherwise, both of them won't be able to live, the golden earthworm said. Ning Shu, why is this monster so hard to fool? Then you're not going to the second level? Ning Shu asked. No, I don't want to go for the time being, the golden earthworm said without thinking. Ning Shu wiped his face. Without the golden earthworm, she would have to spend a lot of time mining. However, this girl looked at the golden thread grass like a fool and couldn't be dragged away. Ning Shu also squatted down and looked at the baby in the bud. Caught off guard, the baby opened its unfocused golden eyes. It seemed to be looking at Ning Shu, but it also seemed like it wasn't. Its eyes were unfocused. Chapter 23:18. Ning Shu glanced at the golden earthworm on the other side. Didn't he tell the earthworm that the pocket-sized baby had woken up again? Otherwise, it would go crazy. Let the baby grow into an earthworm, tsk. In just a second or two, the baby closed its eyes again, clenched its fist, sucked on its thumb, and turned over. The golden earthworm stood up and looked kindly at the pocket-sized baby. Ning Shu didn't say that the baby had woken up twice. Otherwise, it would go crazy and throw its venom everywhere. When will it grow up? Ning Shu asked. She didn't have much time to stay here. The flow of time in the 9-Palace Mountain was much slower than in the system space to begin with. If he were to stay here and guard the child, who knew when the time would come, it would be too late for him to leave. She should be able to grow up soon. I don't know. Didn't you say that your race is very familiar with the golden thread grass? I already said that it's a legend. I've never seen it before. The golden earthworm was really arrogant. Ning Shu thought about it and decided that the baby still needed a long time to grow up. Thinking about the mummy in the secret chamber, it seemed that it had been guarding for at least 100 years. Ning Shu quickly shook his head. Guarding a baby for a few hundred years? Ning Shu said to the golden earthworm, you really don't want to go? No. Nothing can tempt me now. The earthworm stared at the baby in the flower bud, thinking about how to turn into a 2-legged monster and make the baby stare at it every day. Then, it would imitate its appearance and grow up. Ning Shu didn't want to waste any more time. After thinking about it, he dripped a few more drops of the emerald green liquid, treating it as watering. Then, he rushed to the next danger zone to look for a soul stone mine. With the earthworm guarding there and the dense wind blades outside the mine, it should be safer. Ning Shu came to a danger zone alone. Moreover, Ning Shu didn't dare to approach it at all because it was a minefield. The sky was crackling with thunder, and it was very scary. The lightning was very thick. Ning Shu had to think about whether he would be electrocuted while digging with a shovel in such an environment. Furthermore, lightning was of the extreme yang attribute, while the soul would more or less carry the yin attribute. If struck by lightning, one's soul would definitely be damaged. It was no wonder that no one wanted to excavate the spirit stone mines in these dangerous places. Each one was more dangerous than the last, with thunder striking day and night. Ning Shu couldn't possibly remove the dark clouds in the sky, could he? Did he want her to mine with a lightning rod? It was very dangerous. This was not an ordinary thunder. It was even mixed with the tribulation clouds of self-cultivators. The tribulation clouds were divided into different levels. What kind of heaven-defying thing was inside for these tribulation clouds to gather together, as if they were determined to strike him to death? Ning Shu carefully moved over and stepped on the bones. There were many bones along the way. There must have been people who came here to search for treasures, but they all died. The closer they got to the mountain range, the more oppressive it felt. There was a dense heavenly might hanging over their heads, making it difficult to breathe. Ning Shu stopped in her tracks and looked at the rolling dark clouds. The entire mountain range was shrouded in lightning. Lightning struck the mountain range again and again. Anyway, the whole mountain range was pitch black. There were no trees or bushes. The ground had probably been struck for a long time, and it had actually become very tough. Under the wanton sweep of the lightning, the whole mountain range showed a dark luster like black iron. Ning Shu didn't want this mine anymore. The first two mines were lucky, but this was a real confrontation with the heavenly might. Thinking that there was a shattered world waiting to be repaired, Ning Shu could only brace himself and move forward. Pa! A bolt of lightning draped over Ning Shu's body. His soul was about to be torn apart, and there was an incomparably scorching temperature that wanted to burn Ning Shu into ashes. Ning Shu's hair stood on end, and he couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of smoke. This was only the edge. If he wanted to enter the center, he would be chased by lightning. To a certain extent, he was now a ghost, and ghosts were most afraid of things like lightning. Ning Shu was speechless. A few of them were difficult. He wanted to ask why there was something here, and why the lightning was targeting this place. There was probably some treasure, which was why there were so many bones here. They were all here to search for treasure, but they didn't see any treasure, and now there was a pile of bones. The weaker souls were directly scattered by the lightning. Ning Shu stretched out some vines to the center of the mountain range where the lightning was concentrated. The lightning struck the vines and directly turned them into ashes. The power of the lightning also passed along the vines to Ning Shu's body. It made her soul dim a lot. Ning Shu sighed and spat out smoke. Ning Shu touched his chin. He didn't want to go near the minefield. He started to dig a tunnel from afar into the mountain range. It was very time-consuming, and there was no one around. Ning Shu spat a mouthful of saliva on his palm, picked up the shovel and began to dig the tunnel. This was the stupidest way, and he had to dig deeper. If he dug shallowly, the power of the lightning on the surface would still be transmitted to her body. Ning Shu dug. Damn, this soil was really hard. Sparks flew from the shovel. Ning Shu threw the shovel away, took out the ring, and shot a ray of light at it. Then, he took the shovel and dug again. The result was that the soil was harder, and the shovel was bent. What the hell, with the passage of time, the soil has become harder. It was said that the sea changed into mulberry fields, but this thing was getting harder and harder. Ning Shu came out of the hole and looked at the mountain range shrouded in dark clouds from afar. Ning Shu released his mental strength and used it to scan the entire mountain range. But the soil was too hard, and it was a little difficult to squeeze his mental strength deeper. With this kind of hard soil, even earthworms might not be able to drill in. Could it be that he had to give up just like that? Ning Shu floated up and looked at the mountain range below from a high altitude. The entire mountain range appeared in front of Ning Shu. The entire mountain range looked like an oval egg, but the egg was completely black. Ning Shu expressed his doubts. If it was an ordinary earthworm, it definitely wouldn't be able to drill in. How could it see that there was a soul stone mine here? As for the golden earthworm, it drank the soul origin liquid like sweet water, and its body had mutated. Ning Shu convinced himself that there were no soul stones here, and it was too dangerous. It was better to retreat. But his heart was similar to the other cultivators. He felt that there should be some treasure here, and he was reluctant to give it up. It was too damn dangerous. The choice between treasure and life. Ning Shu tried to use other methods to enter the mountain range. Why was the lightning tirelessly striking this place? The existence of the lightning tribulation was to eliminate heaven-defying existences. If it was eliminated, it would naturally disappear. If it passed, it would become stronger. Ning Shu and those cultivators who died here and turned into bones had similar thoughts. There must be treasures here. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.